Okay, I think we're waiting for Mark Frost to join us. Hopefully he's here shortly. Mark, we are now streaming live. We kicked it off right at 5:30 on the number. So the meeting is yours.
All right. Thanks very much. Just pull up my script here.
Before we get into hearings too, I can do a quick update for planning director to buy you some time.
Well, let me call to order the Planning Commission meeting of September 19th. It is 5:30 p.m. Let's kick off the meeting. Let's start with some planning director updates.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. We have a couple matters on tonight, but I wanted to make a quick introduction. We have with us Jacob Harner, who is our newest member of the planning team. Jacob joins us from Portland and Clark County prior. He's now a Gorge resident. So you'll be seeing him around. He's going to be logging into the meeting, watching the meeting, and he'll be probably making some presentations before you soon enough. But I just want to do a quick intro. I believe we also have Alice Nielsen, who has not joined in yet. Alice is our development coordinator and will be working with some process improvements that we've been working on, being a project and program manager as we work through e-permitting and really kind of streamlining some of the things that we do in development review for projects. So you'll probably be seeing her soon enough. And then we'll, without further ado, we can get right into the meat of the meeting.
All right, appreciate that. Thanks very much. All right, so I'm going to open up the quasi-judicial land use hearing. So, ladies and gentlemen, I call to order the September 19th meeting of the Hood River Planning Commission. My name is Mark Frost, and I am the chair of the Hood River Planning Commission. Let me start with a description of tonight's process and a few disclosures required by state law. We have several items on tonight's agenda. Prior to hearing the new applications advertised for tonight's agenda, we will first consider file 2022-31, which has been continued from our August 15th meeting. The public testimony is closed on the matter, and we will hear only closing remarks prior to the Planning Commission's deliberation. So before we move to that, does anyone in the Planning Commission have any new disclosures that they would like to make? I just want to give you a moment if anyone wants to come off mute, if there's anything that's changed on your side. I see Bill Irving has raised his hand. Go ahead, Bill.
I have, I guess, since the meeting, I mean, I've driven up and down that street hundreds of times over 20 years, but since we had the meeting, I did take another tour of the immediate vicinity of the project. That street probably between, you know, all the way actually Cascade from Second up to, you know, 9th or something like that. I guess what I noted was that it seems like the development on the north side, the lodge has been there a while. It's commonly owned, and I don't think any conditions are going to change on that side of the street. I did not note really any other retail uses in anywhere on that block, probably until you get down to where between between 5th and 6th Street on it. And then I also was trying to understand in our C2 zone the kind of size of some of those buildings that could be built out based upon envelope. And I kind of was looking for other buildings that I thought were 5 stories or, you know, more than 50 feet in town. And I think that we might have one or more that are about that high, about 50. The tallest buildings that I noted were probably Paris Fair, and then the southeast corner of the building that is on the corner, it's a Heilbronner building, which is on the corner of 3rd and Cascade. I asked staff to see if we could get some building heights on those, and they did not put that in the record. So that's it.
Okay. Thanks for that. Go ahead, Vice Chair Sue Powers.
So same as Bill, I want to comment on ex parte, and I did do a visit to the site, both drove on the street and I walked on it because I really want to get a feel for the relative scale of buildings around it. So that's kind of what I noticed. There's nothing quite of the same size as what's being proposed. And I also wanted to get an appreciation for the distance to the residential areas. You know, it's just across the street, but just physically how it feels.
Any observations you want to pass along?
You know, there's multifamily dwellings, but I guess it's not unlike what Bill said, it's still all family dwellings of various sorts. It wasn't commercial. So I did notice that.
Okay. Thanks, Sue.
Mr. Chair, not to jump in front of anyone, we did have a Grant Hinman raise their hand, and this is probably in regards to, could be in regards to process or questioning anyone on disclosure.
Actually, I was going to go to that. So next in the script. So does anyone in the audience or commission question or have any questions about process, disclosure, ex parte contact, bias, conflict of interest, or otherwise challenge the participation of any member of the commission? So did I just see somebody get promoted? Grant Hinman?
Hi.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, this is Jennifer Hinman. I am unsure at where we are and what I'm supposed to say. This is Mr. Nielsen. You know what I'm here about. Is this the issue at hand right now? I can't hear you.
I believe you were here for the hearing. We're not in yet, but just to make sure that you didn't have procedural objection based on this current continuation, I believe the last matter on tonight's agenda is for you.
Okay, yes, I will wait. Thank you.
Okay. With that, then let me keep going here. And just to recap, we're beginning with our 7:15 Cascade hearing, where we closed the record, or rather, we had a continuation at our last meeting on August 15th, and we're here tonight to close out the record, and the Planning Commission will deliberate. Before we go to that, we did receive comments from the applicant. We had then a period of time where the public could write in additional testimony, which we received, and then the applicant provided a final rebuttal. So that is all now captured and in the written form. But before I close the record, I just want to invite the applicant, if there's anything else they would like to add. Obviously, we have their final rebuttal, but if you have any parting comments before we close the record and move to deliberation, let's promote the applicant.
How about now?
We hear you now.
Outstanding. If this is an appropriate time, I just have a few things I'd like to remark on.
Go ahead.
Great. Well, first of all, I just want to say good evening, everybody. I want to thank all of you as members of the Planning Commission, also the staff and members of the public who made time to attend tonight and previously. Everyone who's taking part in this process, those who supported our proposal and those who haven't, they're giving their time because they care about our community and want to see us succeed together according to their own understanding of what success for Hood River looks like. And for this small victory of engagement over empathy alone, if nothing else, I'm incredibly grateful. I want to say my vision for making Hood River my home successful includes us becoming a community where our kids, where my kids, can hope to build a life of their own. If Hood River becomes a community comprised only of those who are already here, or those who are wealthy enough to buy in at today's real estate prices, we're going to stagnate. We're going to have a far less vibrant, diverse, and livable place for it. And being a city with attainable housing, it's not just my vision; it's also city policy. It's Hood River's own stated policy goals that informed and inspired this project and the way it was shaped. The updated housing needs analysis was written by Sustainable Northwest and accepted as policy by City Council and states that we need to build 297 new dwellings using C2 zoning allowances for mixed use buildings specifically. And I submitted all of that language previously, so you should have it in front of you. In fact, the housing needs analysis action item 1.1, that's the first, directs the city to identify land to rezone and allow moderate and high density single family detached and multifamily development. That's precisely what we're here asking to do. This policy, housing needs analysis 1.1, goes on to describe what kind of land the city views as desirable candidate for rezoning. It states, when selecting land to rezone, the city of Hood River should focus on land that is vacant along transportation corridors with existing water service and in areas with current or planned access to retail and services. That's a direct quote. This parcel isn't just a good fit for rezoning in support of new dwellings, it's uniquely well qualified. It's situated along Cascade Avenue, a collector, and Oak Street arterial. It has pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure on both street frontages. There's adequate utility service at the site, and it's located in the downtown business district with all the amenities that are offered there. And it's adjacent to existing C2 parcels and multifamily. Additionally, rezoning is the only way this parcel will see new residences built. While structures of similar stature may be built in the C1 zoning, and I want to emphasize that, without rezoning, you can get buildings very, very close to what we're proposing. The square footage requirements, though, of the C1 ordinance means that no dwellings can be built without a change of zoning to C2 on that parcel. Something is going to be built in this lot. It's not going to stay in undeveloped excess parking area. The choice is whether the next structure will be new housing that includes moderate income rental apartments or another similarly sized building that is office and medical services type uses, potentially with no on-site parking at all. I live here. I've built homes here before. I hope to continue doing so. My proposal keeps the existing moderate income rental housing in place, and we're committing to prohibiting our apartments from being used as short-term rentals, improving the sidewalks, we're going to plant street trees and do much, much more. Housing our community with attainable multifamily dwellings close to amenities through this type of rezone isn't just my proposal, it's city policy. It's not easy, I get that, but it is worthwhile. And I think that doing difficult but worthwhile things is what we're here for. So again, I want to say thank you for your time through this long process, and I will remain available should you have any questions.
Appreciate that, Mac. Thanks for that. Okay, with that, then we're going to move to our Planning Commission deliberation. We're going to close the record. We have a lot of public comments and submissions, so that is now all in the record. So we'll move to Planning Commission deliberation. Before we do that, I know that there were a few questions that the Planning Commission had for staff. And so I'd like to turn it over to Dustin to answer any questions that, or if you could just do a synopsis before we move into our deliberation.
You bet. Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was a couple items that had come up that I'd heard that I wanted to take an opportunity to address to help kind of dial in the procedural ask that you have and maybe provide some clarity on some items that are already in the record. These are really kind of more procedural, less the new evidence. But for that, and before you got into deliberation, there's a couple things I have to offer for your deliberation as well. One of the items that needed some clarity and that the applicant had spoke about in its rebuttal was some of the criteria related to the number of dwellings that could be built on this site, whether it was rezoned or not. And the neighbors actually had asked about this as well. The site in total, all three parcels, parcel 6500, 6501, and 6502, which includes the 12 dwelling units that currently reside there now, and the 6501 and 6502, which are essentially a surface parking area. The total number of dwelling units that could be built on this parcel today, as it's zoned C1, is 12. So there is zero headroom available from the current number of dwelling units built on this property to more development. And that's really comes out of the C1 zoning criteria for units. The first unit needing 5,000 square feet and then 1,500 square feet afterwards. That number gets you to 12. And that's why the applicant basically has stated that if you don't rezone the property, you will get basically zero more units. And I can confirm the size, 2,500 square feet of site area under the current zone will get 12 units. Second question had to do with, and this came up during the hearing and in it regarding short-term rentals. The purpose is of developing residential in many ways were to actually to have long-term rentals and not and to limit that exposure. With some concern that since this property is already in C1 and also in C2, that it would have the potential to be built and then basically become all short-term rentals, essentially defeating the purpose. If you see in your packet, on the August 22nd letter from the applicant, it states that the applicant, as condition of approval, would voluntarily not apply for short-term rentals. So that condition, if installed, could be binding not only on the applicant, but their successors. And that's something that comes out of the record already. They have voluntarily stated that. Further, we could talk about things in the works on city council, but I think for the immediate request and from the applicant related to just this proposal, that is in the record. Another item that was discussed was the relationships of needed housing. And this comes from the ORS 197 regards to needed housing not being able to be judged or weighed by criteria that aren't specifically clear and objective. Essentially in Oregon, this used to apply to needed housing, types of housing that were identified as needed. Later, there was an amendment to that statute that basically stated that any housing in the state of Oregon is deemed needed housing. Therefore, by process or by discretionary criteria, we could not deny, evaluate, or really frustrate that development from occurring. So in terms of the number of dwelling units needed to get to needed housing, it is really one. I mean, there is really, case law is trending towards any development, any housing falls in the category of needed. It's all needed. The one issue I would take with that would be in regards to the planned unit development conversation. I believe that's an alternative method to our conventional developments that has some flexibility built in. But for some arguments regarding PUDs, any residential development constitute needed housing. The other piece where this does also come into play is under what criteria do we evaluate this? Do we evaluate this under multifamily standards, or do we evaluate it under other standards that, because of the mixed use nature of the building? The really only differentiating factor between 16040 and 050 is the compatibility criteria. So this gets a little complicated when it comes to needed housing not being subject to compatibility standards, because compatibility is very much a discretionary standard. However, 4% of this building approximately, or 760 square feet, is cited as commercial. So essentially that opens up that portion of the building that really could be eligible. Does 760 square feet of retail in this area constitute or how does that weigh into compatibility? So I think that still is some fair game for compatibility discussions. However, again, back to the compatibility really being off limits for the other parts of the housing, it does become a little complicated. A further question, how much commercial was needed to find that a project was a mixed use project? In our code, it states that uses built residential, built in conjunction with commercial uses on the same lot or parcel are allowed to be considered mixed use. There's no lower ceiling, or there's no lower floor to really establish a commercial use. However, I guess that would be limited to if there was a number that was so small that we couldn't actually determine that a commercial occupancy would fit in there. There's probably an argument to be made that this actually can't be commercial space. However, there's no floor that you actually have to have a certain 500 square feet to be deemed mixed use. And then in terms of the standard criteria for judging a commercial zone change, those are listed in your staff report. Those fall under 1708, 030 and 040, and they show up really in your packet already in the initial staff report. There's probably some supplemental information that has been included in there from the applicant, but you have that at hand. So that's really one of the run-up of some of the questions that I gathered as from various commissioners throughout the process. I think we have a hand up in the panelist.
Go ahead.
This commission. So that's what I have. I'm here for your deliberation and discussion as you go through items. I'll be happy to jump in. We also have Dan Cairns from legal here to help us with some sticky wickets.
All right. Thank you, Dustin. Commissioner Irving has a question.
Sure. Two questions. One at a little bit of what Dustin asked. It appears that there are 3 separate tax parcels, right, that we're dealing with. And the existing multifamily structure is on one of them, right?
Both correct.
I'm confused as to why we couldn't have the south parcels, 2 parcels, 50 by 100, 100 by 100, developed to the same intensity that or the north 2 parcels developed to the same intensity that the south parcels couldn't, or not to the same intensity, but if you do the math, I mean, we could get additional housing units on 10,000 square feet there. I mean, what year was do we know what year the building was built?
Estimated in mid-60s.
So at that point, we didn't have a standard for parking. So we can't necessarily say that the existing parking there is necessarily associated with the existing use, right? So why couldn't we put another 5 units on the north parcel and say that the south parcel was non-conforming from a pre-existing non-conforming from a parking perspective?
You would have to make that interpretation and findings based on something. Parking was required. I can tell you on the current status right now, the entire parcel and the density requirements that today apply to that parcel limit the number of units to what they are today.
There's nothing on the north 2 parcels, I guess, is the question I'm asking. There's nothing on them. It's not developed.
It was surface parking.
But so what would preclude you from putting 5 more or going through our R3C1 density provisions and putting housing on those parcels?
Yeah, one would have to make the argument that they are completely and wholly separate, not just by tax lot, but by whatever previous development was approved, requiring to go back to the 60s, assuming some back interpretation. But just because they're separate tax lots does not mean that they're separate and developable. Nor are they essentially immediately subdividable, or we could complete, just because they are separate parcels doesn't mean that we automatically separate them from the equation. We have numbers of
But
houses.
I guess I mean, this is being devil's advocate here. I don't necessarily agree that you've proven the point to me that they are. Right? We're dealing with the 1960s. Let's go back and find what was approved at that point. What was the intent of the use of those parcels? They may happenstance be used for overflow parking right now, but we just changed our parking minimums in these zones anyway. So why do we need that parking associated with those parcels? So I just not getting that part of you can't do anything there. And I don't know that it's super relevant with our decision, but I just don't agree. That point has not been proven to me.
Yeah, it's not the parking that mandates it. It's the area under C1.
Right, which it's a 10,000 square foot lot. We take our R3 standards and 5,000 minus this, and where you could do our 10,000 square feet, you could do our middle housing there. There's lots of ways you could get additional housing on that parcel. Yes.
Yeah, I don't believe that I believe we had legal opinion in the past under prior council that basically said the reason why this thing exists is because the 12 units required this much area. So I believe that's already passed in previous evaluations by previous council Alex.
Okay. That was one of
that's been the held long standing.
Okay, well, no one has provided us with that information. That's not in the record. We don't understand that. And it doesn't appear that that's your comments are supported at this point to me. So
yeah, I'm using the current code, the C1, and I would say based on the mathematics of the code and the site, there's 12 units under C1 permitted.
Okay. It's from a transactional perspective, it would seem to me that there are no encroachments, and literally Zach could go and sell 250 by 100 lots to a third party, and they could do whatever they wanted with them. And I don't know that we would have any recourse to prevent that from happening. So I don't see how these uses are entwined. But that's we probably don't agree on that particular position. I guess the next question is I asked the applicant and he didn't have a good the response that the applicant had when I asked why we were rezoning the south parcel was that that's what the planning department told us we had to do. And I don't know that we got a confirmation of that from staff as to kind of why we're requiring that. So it'd be great to understand that.
Well, it is the applicant's request, not the staff request. My suggestion would certainly be that your entire development is comprised of a conditional use that covers all pieces. I absolutely would suggest that that conditional use covers the piece to the south, that the terms and condition and improvements which are shown on that parcel be incorporated into this. That the density requirement be evaluated because of the lack of record that we just talked about. That the conditions, the improvements that are slated there should be commingled into one proposal. So rather than having a subject property that is a split development with a split zone, we would absolutely recommend that a single property be under single zoning, under a single conditional use. And those are the level of improvements that are shown in the applicant's plan as well, consistent with that. Improvements are shown on the southern property already existing. The entire parcel is evaluated for its entire parking requirement, for its entire requirements for landscaping, whereas that standalone parcel or that property to the south has no terms and conditions binding it to any level of improvements. So the benefit now is that we have a conditional use that controls the entire site, a conditional use that mandates amount of landscaping, conditional use that has restrictions at this point, having a short-term rental prohibition in place where they are not now.
Okay. So those are my two questions. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Bill. Anyone else have questions for staff before we open up our deliberation? I see Kate Hoffman has her hand raised.
Hi, thank you. I had some questions about state ordinances and the Hood River Municipal Code, and if there is some sort of hierarchy of what controls over what. For example, like the issue with the clear and objective standards for evaluation of residential development, right? Like, or for the zoning change. There's specific ordinances that outline what you are supposed to do. And then we have our municipal code that has additional, what sounds like at this point, arguably subjective at times, criteria included in the municipal code. And what I'm wondering is if the state passes a statute that says you must do A, and our municipal code says you must do B, and the ordinance says you shouldn't do B. I know this is all kind of like a bit of a gray area, it sounds like. Is there one or the other that is weighted more? Or like, for example, if we make a decision on something that seems not appropriate under the clear and objective standards in the ordinances, is that something that will be an issue later on appeal or something? Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chair, may I have the floor?
You may.
Thank you. Typically in these matters, the state always preempts the local code. So these things are written to be pretty much dropped down. When it comes to clear and objective standards, that is a state mandate that essentially renders useless our compatibility discussions and anything that's not clear and objective. So that is a top down. That is not the matter before in terms of rezones. The rezone is a discretionary request that is not subject to clear and objective standard analysis or those preemptions. And those criteria are the local criteria. So in this instance, the criteria are not state written criteria. They're from the local code, the Hood River Municipal Code, and those apply. However, as you mentioned, if you were to render a decision on this based on compatibility, for example, for the housing, that would be an area that could be grounds for an appeal. Mm-hmm. So applicant or a neighbor could be, would be aggrieved to saying, they made a decision on this application for probably adversarial that based on it was not compatible. The housing is not compatible. That would be grounds for an appeal and using the state's code.
Okay.
Or the revised statute.
Okay. And because it appeared to me that there was a statute specifically about zone changes and the statutory approval criteria for a zone change, wherein one of the bullet points says that a city may not deny an application for a housing development located within the UGB if the development complies with clear and objective standards. And I felt slightly confused about whether or not I was then supposed to care about anything in the municipal code about other standards.
It's good to care about other standards.
Yes,
typically,
of course. But
typically the big preemption there comes with affordable housing. Mm-hmm. Senate Bill 8 that came in really provided a number of safe harbors and safeguards to affordable housing. This is not an affordable housing project. Mm-hmm. It may be generally affordable, but is not publicly subsidized. It's not mandated to find a certain percentage. It's not a not-for-profit corporation. But it is needed housing, but it wouldn't be considered capital A affordable.
Sure. Okay. And it didn't, the particular ordinance I'm talking about, I'm sorry if this is really like nitpicky, but I'm just trying to be clear, was a ORS 227.157. And it did not appear to be talking about affordable housing, but perhaps I misunderstood. Like it was, I believe, brought up that ordinance was in the materials somewhere that I was reading as well. And I just felt like it was very specific. like reading the ordinances in order, chronological order, the ORS 197-303 defines the needed housing, which you've already brought up and mentioned that that's like outlined in all of the city documents about affordable housing or the housing needs analysis or the housing needs analysis update, which includes all multifamily housing at various pricing, including subsidized housing, et cetera. And then the 197.307 outlines the clear and objective criteria specifically for needed housing for residential housing. And then the 227.175 says that you cannot deny an application for housing development. So I don't know what I'm exactly asking other than how complex the criteria is. And I think that's really the confusing part. It seems like maybe for not just me.
Appreciate the comment. Wonder if there's a question though that you're seeking clarification on.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, just, sorry, I suppose Dustin already answered it, which is that like, we still need to specifically address the municipal code requirements, even if to me, they don't seem clear and objective regarding the housing. I can rescind my vague question.
Okay. Did you have any other questions?
No.
Okay. Anyone else from Planning Commission have any other questions? All right. On the matter tonight, we have first a zone change request. We have a conditional use permit and a site plan review. Who would like to kick us off with our deliberations? Kate Hoffman, I see your hand is still raised. Do you want to kick us off? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I figured I might as well, since I just spent a bunch of time talking. Now my
You have
vocal
the mic.
cords are all warmed up. I spent a lot of time this week in reading through all the materials again, as you can probably tell from my last comments. And I think that the applicant has done a very thorough job of explaining how they meet the requirements, both in the ordinances and in the Hood River Municipal Code for this project. And I don't think that we could find any clear or objective substantive reasons to deny it, in my personal opinion. And the staff report, all the conditions of approval, I think, are applicable and necessary. That's what I've got.
All right, appreciate that. Vice Chair Powers.
So I also spent a lot of time reading this and really struggling with how to react to it all, because I was under the impression that the rezone did not have to have these clear and objective standards. That was housing specific. The rezone, I looked specifically at the criteria that is in the Hood River Municipal Code. And I think the way it's written is like, if this and one of the following, if those conditions are met, then the rezone could be accepted. And it was if it's not unreasonably harmful or incompatible with existing whatever situation.
Uses.
Okay. And I couldn't get past that, honestly, because, and that was why I did, actually a walk on the site to appreciate the potential compatibility. And I know this is subjective, but it does seem, I guess I would call it unreasonably incompatible because of the size of the structure being proposed. And because of that, it would be harmful to the neighborhood. And I didn't want to end at that result because I really want this development. I think the applicant has done a great job I found myself getting frustrated at all the opposition to it because it was profit motivated. I'm thinking, well, that's exactly how it should work, and that's how it gets done. And we live in a capitalist society, and like that is all a good thing. And there's a lot of reasons that were opposition comments that I completely didn't agree with. Despite all that, and really wanting the housing and knowing that we need the housing, I couldn't get past that very first statement on the rezone requirement. So I do think it's unreasonably incompatible. And that's a function of the size of the building.
Thank you, Sue. Anything else?
No.
All right, let's move around and hear some other thoughts. Next up. Yeah, Commissioner Stepina. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, before I was just trying to read through 227175 just to make sure I understood that. So I was trying to make sure, not sure anybody else pulled that up, but I see what Kate's saying. Yeah, also spent a lot of time reading through all the materials. I tend to agree with the statement that the applicant really speaks directly towards the requirements for the city code, the housing needs analysis, the goals of the city council, et cetera, the state mandates for Oregon to provide housing, 20-year plan, et cetera, all speaks to that. I am very familiar with the area, having lived on Columbia and using that, basically that walk of Cascade to get downtown all the time. Definitely can understand the appreciation people have taken into the considering what it will do to the specific area and the look and feel. I have a hard time on understanding within the downtown business district. It may be that there's a couple blocks removed, and I know we have to take that into consideration, the zoning changes. But it's, to me, within the downtown district, many people are looking for ways to add housing. I took into consideration a lot of what some of the comments from people like Mike Kitts and Arthur Babbitt said regarding just how difficult it is to find a parcel of this nature to be able to build something that will add a lot of housing within this area. So I think that there has to be some consideration given to that, given that we don't run across something like this a lot, and it's not something that necessarily has to be right next to another building of this magnitude. I feel that it would not, if you take that into the grander scheme of downtown, necessarily become a harmful effect. And I know, again, it's subjective. I don't feel that it's harmful to the area. And I know there's been a lot of focus given on the fact that it's at the end of the zone, versus being in the middle of it, et cetera. So I just wanted to add comment about that, but tend to agree with Commissioner Kate Hoffman's assessment as well, regarding there's nothing I can find within what I've read regarding code, et cetera, that would be an obvious way to stick out between C1 and C2. And I think that regarding the subjectivity of the entire idea about being harmful and et cetera, I can't decide on a criteria for that without, what's to say that 3 buildings down or 2 blocks down would be any less harmful regarding the site, the size, et cetera. So, yeah, that's all I'd like to add.
All right. Thanks, Commissioner Stepina. All right. Let's keep going here. Who else would like to weigh in? All right. I see Commissioner Petzing got there first. Go ahead.
So thank you.
Can we hear you? Yeah.
Yes, hopefully.
Yeah, we're good.
So I that whole issue about objective and subjective standards, the whole question of subjectivity then becomes about whose opinion are we taking into account? And you know, I respect that there were a number of neighbors who are very opposed and feel that this would be for them in their experience a harmful impact on their existing uses in the immediate vicinity. And I, you know, can certainly understand when we move to a place, we usually move because that's the way we like it. And so anything that changes after that is often frustrating for us. And so I completely understand that frustration. And, you know, I can't really imagine investing $1 million in anything because I've never had that, but I can imagine if you just invested $1 million in a, you know, beautiful townhome with a beautiful view in a place that felt exactly perfect to you. And then there was going to be a change that would be subjectively very difficult. Not being in that position, from my subjective criteria, I don't see that the rezone would be unreasonably harmful or incompatible with the existing uses. I understand it's larger than perhaps every building. I know we had some questions about the exact heights of certain buildings, but I think that the impacts that people are concerned about are pretty typical impacts for living in a downtown business district. And so I think that it's inside of an area that is intended to have commercial. It's inside of an area that is, you know, within that same block, there is commercial, not on the exact street, but within that one block, there is some commercial. It's an area that's intended to be commercial. It's, you know, it has other multifamily units. It's intended to be dense housing. So I think that it's not incompatible, even using a subjective criteria. So I'm comfortable with the rezone with subjective or objective criteria, I guess I would say. I also, there's been a lot of comments that I do want to really push the fact that we desperately need apartments in Hood River. It's not being built. We need it. It's not happening. I know that there were brought up some potential projects that are in the works, and none of them are actually moving forward that I can see. It's obviously extremely difficult to develop, you know, multifamily and especially kind of smaller apartments. I'm not saying affordable, but less expensive apartments. And I am, you know, because of that, it weighs more so for me in looking at subjectively and objectively, but subjectively, you know, what kind of is reasonable to expect in areas that we have set aside as places where we would expect dense housing. The fact that we have not been able to get that housing built shouldn't then become a reason to keep us from building that housing in the future. And so I'm really wary of comments that are, you know, saying, well, we haven't had this type of thing before. We haven't, and that's a huge problem. and we desperately need it now.
Excellent. All right, thanks, Mary Ruth. Commissioner Irving.
I guess I've been trying to look at this as kind of two different decisions. And it's confusing to me that we have our rezone criteria, because the rezone presumes a use that would be beneficial, but I don't see anything necessarily that in our rezone that requires that use or conditions the rezone upon that specific use. And I know that we may have put some conditions on rezones in the past. I think maybe a long time ago down at the Expo Center, we did something like that, or we conditioned a rezone upon some development standards. But I'm viewing it kind of that if we rezone it, even though we have an application in front of it, conditions might change and something completely different might happen there. So I mean, there's as far as I can tell, there's nothing to prevent that. And so I'm thinking about this like, okay, if I were going to stick a C2 building there, what could it be? I've got a 10,000 square foot site. If we approve a rezone, we could have a, ground floor restaurant. We could have a second floor bar. We could have 2 or 3 floors of a hotel above it. And I can get myself pretty comfortable that those types of uses would be out of character for that block face, anywhere in that block, because I know what's going to happen across the street at the Lodge condos, which is nothing. That is fully developed and it's owned in common. So I think we can understand that there's not going to be any changes there. And so I'm not at the point where I feel like that the rezone is compatible with the neighborhood. And I could get to the place where Sue was on her particular harmful, but I was if I have to pull up the specifics, I was a little bit more towards the looking at the preservation and promotion of the character of the neighborhood, and also the direction of building development. I mean, I don't necessarily think that with the way building is going to develop that we're going to see retail uses that far out on Cascade Street, because we got the Lodge across the street, and right down the street, half block away is R2. So my first kind of decision is I'm not in favor of the rezone. Even though I think it is a beautiful building, I would love to see it. I think that I was on the buildable lands inventory, the needed housing task force. I'm for urbanization. I think we need these type of projects and products in our downtown. I just don't think that this particular block is where we introduce a maximum build out of C2. I don't think that's what we should do. And I think we're not. I think we would be doing a disservice to our community if we did that. As much as I understand we need apartments, as much as I understand that businesses can't find employees. I mean, I read all the letters, but I just can't get there on that particular. I can't get there to support the rezone. If we, and I kind of think we should look at it as a group, is kind of, do we get to, there's kind of there's a gating decision here. So if we approve the rezone, if we get to the point of approving the rezone, then we have to go back and really dig in and evaluate the application. And then on the application side, I would say I'd probably have some other comments too. And
Right.
Dave's raising his hand, so I'll stop talking while he interjects.
No, thank you, Bill. Go ahead, Dan.
Sure, thank you. If it helps the deliberation, and if people are only able to get over the zone change approval criteria based on a particular development proposal, it is permissible to have a conditional zone change, conditional, conditioned upon a particular development proposal.
Meaning,
I mean,
just to be
otherwise
clear,
you would assume worst case scenario, most intensive possible development allowable under the target zone. In this case, the argument I hear from the applicants and the argument I hear resonating with some of the commissioners is that, well, it's a housing. It's not just because we love C2. So if this commission can find that the zone change approval criteria are met only because of this particular proposal and the number of housing units, it is legal to grant a zone change that's conditioned upon this particular or a particular development happening. Otherwise, nothing is allowed. It's sort of tricky in case the condition isn't fulfilled, but if that's how you view it, a majority of you view it, that's a permissible approach.
comments to that, Bill? Any clarification
Sure.
needed?
I'll jump back in. So if we are able to do something like that, then I go back to, okay, well, if we're conditioning the zone change, what do I think is okay? What do I think is okay, right? Do I think that we should be interjecting a restaurant in this block? I'm not quite sure of that. So I still go back to the types of use that are proposed. I don't necessarily think are compatible. So I could get to, and I think it's the scale of development in that zone that I don't think it's compatible. So I could get to approving a zone change without a retail component that was 35 feet tall. Like I could say, sure, no problem. I'm agreeable to housing in a change to zone change conditioned for this particular parcel for this use without those elements. I'm there 200%. But I don't know if we can do that.
Just to clarify what you're suggesting then. So what you're saying is per Dan's idea here, that we approve a zone change to C2 conditional on a project being residential and living by the residential height restriction, which is 35 feet, not the mixed use, which is 45 feet, which we really know, if we're saying residential is 35 feet, because of this particular site, that actually means it'll go up 45 feet.
That's not what I came to the meeting thinking, but because I didn't think that we would want to go down the road of trying to condition zone change. And if we're going to condition upon use, I mean, who's to say we can't condition the development standards as well? So I would basically, I mean, I think it's a great building. I think you could take the retail out of it and stick another residential unit on the ground floor, and you can knock a floor out of it. And I would love that building. I just don't feel like that particular use in its height and its nature, I would be in support of a zone change for.
Appreciate that.
I'm one member, so I'll pass the torch.
And I mean, let me just say, I fully concur with that approach that I just summarized. But I have a question for Dustin.
Sorry,
Which,
Mr. Chair, just so you know, you have Mari Ruth Petzing with hand waiting on hand up too.
Yep. I just wanted to kind of make a related question, because I think, one of the issues that we see here is this feeling that if we don't make the zone change, we don't get housing. Are there any other options? Can you remind us what we could do with a planned unit development in a C1? And I seem to be remembering another project on Cascade Avenue up by, I forget what the name of that project was, but it was up near 30th. Remember that project?
The last PUD on not sure if it was on Cascade, on Wasco that you evaluated was a C2 zone.
No, it wasn't.
Clear-
It wasn't.
You think he's talking about Clearwater?
Oh, Clearwater, also C2,
But it was a PUD.
was a PUD. Old PUD, but the underlying density is going to yield to C2, which pretty much is limited by open space and limited by height. That's really the C2. So when we evaluated that development, Leeward Apartments was the common name. There was really no upper ceiling to the number of units, but for the design standards around them. The height of the overall building, the footprint, really I'd call the design parameters drove the density.
Okay, but it was C2.
Yeah.
All right, sorry. Commissioner Petzing.
Thank you. I'm really concerned about going off onto this idea of like us trying to somehow design a commercially viable set of parameters. I mean, this is a private development, right? And, you know, as Commissioner Powers said, this is intended to be a way for people to make money, right? I mean, I would love to see us have more kind of community-led development of public bodies and nonprofits, but this is not this case. This has to be a commercially viable development where people, you know, rich people get richer, right? That's how these get done. And I'm so not qualified to even start figuring out how to make all these numbers pencil out with all of the costs and all of the design and everything within all of these different parameters. So I do not want to see us go down a path of coming up with, okay, we're going to rezone this with these parameters that we've come up with on the assumption that somebody's going to be able to make a commercially viable private development to order per our request. And I think we're highly risking and continued empty lot.
All right, appreciate that. Commissioner Hoffman?
I agree with Commissioner Petzing, and I think that for me personally, I am in favor of the idea of a condition of approval, but that condition of approval for the development would be literally this plan happening with no changes. Not redesigning or attempting to redesign the applicant's project.
Okay. Anything else, Kate? All right, Commissioner Mitchell?
Yeah, I mean, like the other commissioners have said, spent a decent amount of time with this application, and you know, I'm in line with you know, Commissioner Stepina and Petzing and Hoffman, and that I think that, you know, this is a really good, thoughtful application here, extremely detailed about why you know, this meets these, you know, conditions for rezoning this. Yeah, I don't want to really belabor the point on top of what, you know, everybody else has already said, but you know, I think that this is a really kind of a unique application here, you know, in a unique area. It's near other C2 stuff. It's near other, you know, apartment complexes. It's near other retail uses. You've talked about the need for housing, the fact that the applicant is willing to put a condition, or willing to, agree to a condition to not have STRs on this is, you know, huge. We've, as Doug mentioned, received letters from, you know, people like Mike Kitts and Arthur Babbitts about why, you know, this application is so unique. And, you know, I know the area well. I used to live on Cascade. You know, I live several blocks away from it, but, you know, I think that this application does actually really make sense in this area. So that's all I have to say for right now.
All right, I appreciate that. I mean, I think if I could, I see Stepina, your hand is still up. If you can drop that. I mean, I think from my
Yeah, well, I
perspective.
had something to add, but I can go.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and just, you know, since we've been speaking about what are the perceived benefits of C2 versus C1, you know, there was a quote that I was looking for. I'm sorry, this packet is gigantic, so it took me a little bit to find, but in the rebuttal from the applicant speaks directly to the conditional use permit and what is their assessment of what is gained by C2. And it does speak to some issues. Number one, you know, there's 4 additional dwellings that are added. I think we, you know, those of us in favor of housing would be happy to see 4 additional dwellings. Of course, you know, it also speaks to Commissioner Petzing's point about, you know, being profitable, et cetera. It's often in community planning that you'll see, you know, especially in this area with C2, there's other small, you know, we're not putting a giant development, restaurant, et cetera, if we're doing something, you know, under 800 square feet or something like that in that space. But also the C2, they speak to, there's an enhanced parking design that's part of it, and there's additional on-site parking. So I know that when I lived on Columbia, you know, we were directly sort of by all the developments on Oak, where everything is very tall, and you know, a lot of us lost our views, but it was mostly because people were putting garages on those sites to you know, go towards alleviating parking on the street. So it's kind of a robbing Peter to pay Paul sort of assessment there, but I think it clearly speaks to, you know, at least in the rebuttal, it's at least made concise to me what's gained by C2 versus leaving it at C1, even though there's some debate about what could be built on C1. There is something in the rebuttal about that as well, but, you know, I won't speak to that specifically about this, but they do call this out. In addition to that, there was concern about, and I think it's just also worth highlighting, in addition to the STRs, concession would be made in which there'd be a condition put in to disallow any development for that site on the south lot, which I know is another issue. So I think a lot of that speaks towards why we would want to consider C2 versus C1 and what are the additional things to consider regarding that exact change.
All right, appreciate that.
Thanks.
Commissioner Stepina. I mean, so from my point of view, I think I align very much with some of the words that Commissioner Irving said, right? Which is that, you know, when I look at the first question, which is the proposed change from C1 to C2, I also can imagine, you know, many uses of this project. As a person that studied urban design and architecture, you know, I want projects, no question, but I also want a city to feel like it's been thought through. And the city has an intentional plan right now of the downtown core being C2, and that the perimeter steps down to C1 and then steps down to R2, and then it steps, sorry, R3, and then it steps down to R2. And that's the way that, you know, people who bought into those neighborhoods, you know, have bought into, and it makes it, it stops urban sprawl from happening, right? If commercial ventures started to spill up Cascade, then, you know, people aren't going into the downtown to shop anymore, and what you end up with is satellite, or, you know, the urban downtown kind of losing its character, losing people going down there. And so I'm concerned on a number of fronts around this project being there, right? the character of the area involved, right? That's one of the criteria for a zone change. It's particular suitability for the particular uses, conservation of the property values. So when you look at the houses around this lot, I'm, absolutely concerned about the property values and, the direction of the building development. I mean, it doesn't, or the criteria to make the zone change, I'm not there either. I definitely want housing. There's no question about that. I wish there was a PUD approach or a C1 approach, but the scale of C2 for me doesn't fit like, make it fit for the character of the neighborhood and all those things that we mentioned before. So I'm in favor of making the zone change so that we can get to the density we want, but not the commercial aspect. And I think that's where I'm at. All right. Commissioner Powers.
So, Mark, do we have a process where we need to first vote on just the rezone?
We can do that. We could, amongst us, so I'm doing a straw poll right now. I'm seeing 4 in favor of the rezone and 3 not in favor of the rezone. So we could definitely look at that first. And looks like I share Powers, your internet is cutting in and out right now. Looks like you're frozen. Can you hear us okay? Let me switch over to Commissioner Irving. You got a hand up?
Yep. Well, can you confirm, for the rezone, we are a recommending body. We're not an approving body.
That is correct.
Right. So, I have read the packet, which is quite lengthy. I agree with a lot of the commissioners' points that I maybe come to a different conclusion then. And I'm kind of thinking that, we could present, we're just a recommending body. Council's going to make this decision, right? So I think for us, we could highlight some alternatives for them. We could take a straight vote and it go for, seems like it might go 4-3 up there. But I think really, this is, we're a recommending body. They're the elected officials. So we let them do their jobs. So I guess to that extent, I would, if I were going to make a motion, it sounds like, I guess I want to make a little bit of comment on the profitability. And if we don't do this, we're not going to get anything. I am in support of for-profit development, and that's the way things get done around here. But to have someone telling me that the only way that I can do a project is X, and if I don't get X, I'm going to, not show up and not do anything. I can't put water in that. That's not the reality of it all, right? That's 100 by 100 viable site in our downtown. I don't think we can be swayed by it's got to be this or nothing. And I think we're kidding ourselves if that's what we believe, right? So I would, I guess I would, if I were going to make a motion, I would either recommend that we don't approve the zone change, but having thrown in kind of Dan's alternative, the things that are really objectionable to me in the zone change are the building height. It's 55 feet tall. I walked around the entire downtown and there's not a building that I saw that is that tall. I had plans, I looked at Paris Fair, it's 50. I looked at the Heilbronner and it's something that too. This is a 55-foot tall building face we're interjecting right here across from a 35-foot tall building. It's big. So so that is really the component of it that is throwing me sideways, as well as that use getting interjected into that block front. Because nothing is ever going to happen at the lodge. I know that. So I would, if I were going to condition an approval, I would probably say that I could be supportive of a zone change conditioned upon, no retail use in that block on that parcel, as well as limiting it to the 35-foot high building standards. And I would make a motion like that, and we would probably have a couple of people vote for it. So maybe I should make the motion and we see where it goes, and then someone else can make one and we can pass both those motions.
Yep,
up,
that sounds.
and then they can run with it.
Before you do that, I know Vice Chair Powers had your hand up and we lost your connection. So did you want to keep going with your thought there?
I was just trying to clarify if we were going to have a vote on just the rezone piece. And depending on where that ends up, then it's a separate vote on the development itself. I was just wondering how we're going to process that.
We could do that. I think we know the answer to that. But do we want to do that first?
Sure. Should we do that? I mean, I'd like to just get that out of the way and then go back to the other component. So how about if I make a motion?
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we approve a zone change for, I'm not quite sure why we're doing it for the south parcel, but for the two northerly parcels, 2C2, with limitations that we have no retail on those parcels, and that they're going to be subject to residential building height standard of 35 feet.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to allow the rezone of the northern parcels only, the northern two parcels, from C1 to C2, but let's say disallow or make a condition, attach a condition that says no mixed use, no commercial element, maintain the project would just be residential, subject to 35 feet tall, typical residential height limitation. Do we have a second? I will second. All right. Any other further discussion? All right, let's see how we vote. Let's go around. If I can get Commissioner Hoffman.
Nay for that one.
Commissioner Stapina.
Nay.
Commissioner Petzing.
No for me.
Commissioner Powers.
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Nay.
Commissioner Irving.
Aye.
And chair votes aye, so the motion does not pass. Okay. Where should we go from here? Any other suggestions?
Well, I think the next logical place to go from here would be the, more or less what Dan was suggesting, which is make a motion to do the zone change from C1 to C2, provided it's for this particular development as stated. Is that what we think should be the next step?
Yep, that sounds good. You want to make that motion?
Sure, I'll make that motion that we approve. Sorry, Commissioner Petzing, did you have something to add?
Thanks. Yeah, I think just in terms of being clear with our language, I'm always a little nervous when we say something like this particular development or something like that. And, I also, one, I want to be clear exactly what we're authorizing, and two, I don't want to lock somebody into a situation where, a minor change then causes problems. So what I would suggest is, if you're wanting to go forward with your motion, something along the lines of a, mixed use, multifamily containing at least 21 units of housing or something like that.
Mhm. Well, I suppose if we need to do that, straw polling sort of the positions 4-3, is it necessary? I suppose is also what I'm thinking.
Well, I think Commissioner Petzing was just asking about.
No, I understand.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, yeah. So I suppose we could word it similar to what you said. Not this particular development, so to speak, but yeah, mixed use. Should we be very specific in the language?
Maybe we could bring back Dan and
Yeah,
Dustin to help us here with how should we talk about it. We like this. There's a motion that's about to be mentioned to like this project because of some of the virtues of the residential component and the density that it requires. So how do we kind of capture that?
Let me give just a few sideboards and then Dustin can fill in the planning details. It's just as a general matter sufficient to refer to the application or the development as proposed, but it seems also there are certain attributes that are critical to a majority's conclusion that the zone change is met. So the number of units would perhaps be a good thing to state. Let's see, also, I have some notes here. I think the minimum number of units is 33. So it's worth stating that the maximum amount of commercial square footage seems to matter. I think they're proposing 760 square feet. No short-term rental of any of the units seem to be an issue. So state that. And so if you approve it subject to what's proposed, you could say in substantial conformance to what's proposed with the following quantitative attributes, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a little bit, I feel you have some tension here between the certainty of the development and also some flexibility in case things change. So I think as substantially proposed, I think matters because I think even some of the people who are concerned about the zone change itself provided some credibility to the design. The use of brick materials, I think, is actually an important piece of the design scale and compatibility without using compatibility as a standard for residential. So those are some of the attributes, the idea that we have structured parking behind the building. I think those are some of the urban design elements that I think are some of the merits of this proposal. So holding fast to the attributes by maybe providing a little bit of flexibility. Hopefully that comes with, insubstantial conformance. If a unit falls out, we haven't, we don't all of a sudden we don't return to planning commission because they've lost a unit. I think those are hopefully what you're getting at, but I definitely think there's a number of design elements that are worth holding to. I think the 33 is important as well because this refers to the preservation of 12 existing units on the site. And I think that's one of the pieces that we as staff really wanted to think about. It's not just new development, it's also preservation. It's not a scrape and redo of units that will probably never be built at the price point they are now. So that's where I think that, trying to maintain a certain number, I think has some merit too. It's not just the number of units, it's also the idea that we've maintained and preserved the units on site. I think that's a big goal 10 push in terms of meeting the criteria of the comp plan preservation, and along with short-term rental status. So substantial conformance with some sidebars may be the appropriate measure of flexibility and certainty.
Commissioner Stepina, you got that? You want to make that motion?
So substantial conformance, and so that makes sense for the language. There's 33 units proposed with 800 square feet of commercial. Do we want to include that into the language? And I'm looking to Commissioner Petzing, I suppose, to. Because I definitely agree with what you're saying. We want to avoid this very specifically, so I want to be very meticulous about how this is worded. Does everybody agree that that should be the language?
Doug, could you repeat that again exactly about the units?
So there's 33 proposed with 800 square feet of commercial.
That's including the 12 existing units, correct? That's what we're talking about.
The 33 includes the 12 existing, correct?
Right.
Yeah,
So-
including the 12 existing. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So something to the effect of substantially conforming to the existing design application, specifically preserving the 12 existing units on the site and retaining as many of the additional 11 residential units as possible.
21.
21, sorry. Dyslexia, math. Is that?
Yeah. I think that's addressing specifically what we're getting at. But I'm trying to, so Dustin, once again, to ensure that we're retaining some of the other elements in design that you're speaking towards, in your opinion, the specific words we should use.
Insubstantial conformance of 2022.
Insubstantial conformance.
31. And if you wanted to highlight your sidebars of I think that's the first part. Insubstantial conformance, particular sidebars that you want to hold fast to.
And insubstantial conformance of.
File number 2022 or conditional use, file number 2022-31.
Okay. So I would make a motion that we approve the zone change proposed in file 2022-1.
31.
31. Provided it remains in substantial conformance of the plan, and that the number of units proposed, this is really difficult here, guys, to make language on this, but the units proposed I don't want to use the number 33. So I think we should say just in substantial conformance of the plan. I don't want to put a number to it.
Okay. Anything else that we want to add? So I think what I'm hearing is the motion on the floor is to approve the zone change, and I'll also add and the conditional use for this project, supporting the design as shown in the applications with substantial conformance to the project that is performed. And I would say, as Dustin was saying, with the structured parking is performed, the height as described, with a commercial development on the ground floor, somewhere approximately around 800 square feet, and the prohibition of the short-term rentals or language around that. That recap it for you, Doug?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
All right, so that is the motion on the floor. Do we have a second? Commissioner Hoffman?
I actually just wanted to clarify, do we need to specify the language so that it specifically covers all 3 tax lots? And I only mentioned that because Commissioner Irving had made a motion that was just for the northern lots. Should we include that it's a rezone for all 3 included, or is that? Do we need to do that?
It seems like that's implied in the.
Okay.
Yep. Seems like
Or
that
not
is
implied,
implied. We can
stated.
clarify that in the motion. I mean, ultimately, as Dustin mentioned, it's going to behoove us to clarify that this is contiguous in the way that the 3 lots operate. Okay. Do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Petzing. Any further discussion or questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Irving.
Sure. I mean, it seemed like, obviously I'm probably a no on this motion, but it seemed like a couple of the elements that Dustin mentioned and you all mentioned as critical were left out of that motion.
For example?
Limitation on the commercial use, right? So I don't know if that there is it's some nominal percent and it's a particular location. I mean, I don't know what it is, but I think the number that came up was 750 square feet, maybe. So I don't know if that is a critical component for you all, but I would maybe suggest you discuss that if you want to include it. Because was that in your motion, Doug, or not?
It is a critical component, I think, for us as well.
I believe the motion said approximately 800 square feet commercial.
First floor. I believe that's
Okay.
what we took in.
Is that what Doug said?
That is what I said. It's just,
Okay, got it. Sorry, there was so much going on. I missed you saying it, so you got it. Perfect. Okay. Step back.
Okay, anything else?
I think we also mentioned the design of the building itself, the design considerations aesthetically, I thought was something that someone mentioned as something that was important to include in the conditions.
Dan and Dustin, I mean, as proposed here, we're proposing the zone change, or the motion is to propose the zone change and to approve the conditional use and the site improvements, which include looking at these materials with the design. So isn't it implied?
That's my read of the motion, substantial conformance, because that's the design matters and
Yeah,
it's part of your deliberation.
Okay, thank you. I apologize. I'm just trying to understand how very specific we need to be in our wording of everything. So thanks.
okay. Commissioner Irving?
I guess we haven't really had a discussion, I don't think, about the actual conditional use. And I think it might warrant that. I mean, I thought we were just talking about zone change and Dan just stepped in and talked about us approving the whole project. So if that's the intent of this motion, then maybe we should spend some time talking about that element. I don't know what the intent of the motion was. I thought
the
it
motion included zone change and CUP.
Yeah.
So you were going for the whole shoot match there, Doug?
Yeah, I think that was the intention. Yeah.
Okay.
Is there something you'd like to discuss prior to the motion for that?
Well, yeah, I will probably jump in and think we should talk about the conditional use criteria then. And I haven't really commented. I haven't expressed my comments on it. I mean, I did at our previous meeting. I am a little bit stuck on the fact that our staff report is evaluating this based upon what I don't think is appropriate decision criteria. As far as the CUP and specifically the site plan. I look at 17-16040 and I say these criteria apply to all site plan review except multifamily and group residential projects. So, and then it jumps us into 17-16050. So for me, this is not a multifamily project, right? There's a commercial element to it. It's a mixed use project. So I believe that our staff report should specifically be evaluating against 17-16040. And there is a difference between those two. And one of those criteria, H, which is left out, is the whole compatibility component. And we haven't gone down into the rat hole of, you know, housing and compatibility, but I would argue that, you know, this is not compatible in this neighborhood. There is nothing within blocks that have the height, bulk, and scale of this building. And I don't know if anyone can argue otherwise. I mean, there's not the stuff across the street is 20 feet shorter, and those are big buildings.
All right, thanks, Commissioner Irving. Mr. Bensing?
So, and the thing that is pushing, the thing that is, we go back to the, well, we can't evaluate it because it's a housing project. Well, the thing that's pushing this thing up an extra 10 feet is the ground floor, right? There's retail that's stuck in there, and that's making the building 10 feet taller. So I think we have to be able to evaluate the compatibility if we have that commercial element in the building. It doesn't, you know, I don't know how we could not do that.
I think
Go ahead, Dan.
under state law, the clear and objective standard applies to residentially zoned and mixed use development. And so I think the only compatibility criterion in this entire equation that's not preempted is the one attendant to the zone change. And that one requires you to find that it will not be unreasonably harmful or incompatible with existing uses. And I don't believe you can apply the CUP compatibility criterion. That's my opinion about the preemptive effect of state law on this.
So to clarify, I can take a multifamily building, I can put some small element of commercial in it, say 100 square feet, so I can throw a coffee out the window, and I'm exempt from all my compatibility standards. Is that what you're saying?
The zone change compatibility criterion is the only one that applies here because it's mixed use. And it's not appropriate to, because it's basically an 800 square foot commercial space. And so you're applying a different compatibility standard to a mixed use residential project, which state law doesn't allow. The zone change, that's not residential, that's a zone change.
Yep. Okay. Well, I'm not there.
Fair enough.
Yep. I mean, I can't imagine that state. I mean, I'm not getting from a mixed use project is housing, because there is other elements of it that are not housing that are causing the incompatibility in my mind. So
Yeah.
is there a spot in state law that specifically says mixed use should be treated as housing?
Yes.
Okay. Have we?
Yeah. And so
we've been provided that.
The test case is, I mean, it's in the chapter 197 where it says that residential projects on residentially zoned land or mixed use zone are subject to clear and objective standards only. And what's really changed in the past 5 years is it used to be just needed housing. Now it's all housing. So the test case that I would hate to see is a large scale commercial project with a residential unit. This one is got only, 800 square feet of commercial and it's 95% residential, maybe more. So this is a largely residential project. So it's not that test case. I would say it falls clearly into the state law requirement that you're subject to clear and objective standards only. And it's just the zone change compatibility criterion that you can apply.
Okay.
And that's just to the zone change aspect of it.
Anyone?
Okay. Anything else, Bill?
No, that's the discussion I wanted to have if we were going to go on the approval
Yeah.
process
All
for
right.
that motion.
Commissioner Petzing?
I just wanted to see, so I mean, we have this pending motion. If I'm pretty happy to split and just do the zone change, which is what we originally talked about. I don't see that it's necessary, but if that helps people because maybe they want to vote separately because maybe their votes are different on the zone change versus the conditional use, then I feel like I'd like to hear that and we could split them.
Okay. Raise your hands if you're interested in just voting for the zone change.
I mean, part of me likes the idea of separating the decisions out. Since, since Dan kind of went into the differences between them.
Yeah, I think the only issue I'm seeing is that well, we would need, well, I guess we already tried the zone change with conditions, so that didn't work.
Yeah.
So I feel like we're a bit past the discussion around just the zone change, to be honest. Unless people want to put that out there.
Well, I assume we'll just, what's the harm in, what happens if we only vote on the zone change? We then have to have this discussion again in the future about the application.
Well, no, we'll go straight into the second motion.
Yeah.
So just break it into
okay.
two votes.
Okay.
So,
So we're having this discussion tonight.
yeah,
fully,
go ahead, Bill.
Regardless. Okay.
I mean, you guys have a motion on the table. There
Yeah.
seems like there's a majority for it. I don't know any reason to back up to split it if you don't need to.
Exactly.
I would say for simplicity, efficiency, vote on what you got.
Yep. All right, to reconfirm then, so there's a motion on the floor to approve the zone change and conditional use. And with the idea of supporting the project, substantially conforming to the project as proposed with the parking, I don't want to say the unit number, but as substantially proposed with 750 to 800 square feet of commercial, something around there, a language prohibiting short-term rentals, and structure as proposed in terms of the aesthetics. That's the motion on the table from Commissioner Stepina. Do we have a second?
It's already been seconded, I believe.
Yes, I
Oh,
did.
that's right, Commissioner Petzing. All right, let's, any further discussion? Okay, let's go with a vote. I will start as I see. Commissioner Irving,
I'm a nay.
Commissioner Hoffman,
I'm an I.
Commissioner Stepina,
Aye.
Commissioner Petzing,
Aye.
Commissioner Powers,
No,
Commissioner Mitchell,
Aye.
Chair votes nay. Motion passes 4-3. I thank you all for your time and attention and deliberation. I know there's a lot that went into that. So I thank you for that. I'm suggesting we're going to take a break, Planning Commissioner, before we do that. Dustin, anything else we need to do on that topic?
No, this is going to require a little writing. Your decision is not final until reduce the writing, until I can do that and get it before the Planning Commission chair for signature. That will start the appeal clock for all parties involved and who have participated. So I'm going to need a couple of days to write that down, but I will try to encapsulate your decision. Thank you all for trying to be really articulate with that. And then I'll provide it to the chair for decision. Again, the rezoning aspect, you are a recommending body that will need to be scheduled to subject or on a separate public hearing before City Council. And unless appealed, the conditional use will be final. Thank you all for your time and attention on this. I know it was a lot of material.
Okay, that is topic number one for this evening. I appreciate everybody's attention in that. Let us take a quick recess. If I could keep it fairly quick, it is now 7:15. Wonder if we can get back at 7:20. So 5-minute recess, and then we'll move into the second two cases for the evening. Lack, I appreciate you coming back on the camera.
Thank you
Thanks for
very much.
your proposal.
Appreciate your time.
All right, we are in recess. See you at 7:20 Pacific time. All right, coming back. This thing on? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, it is 7:20. We shall continue. So now I'll call back to order the Planning Commission meeting for tonight. It is now 7:20. Let me just bring my script over. Give me a second here. So now we will consider the next two applications before us tonight. Tonight, Planning Commission will review the record for each application, take public testimony, and then determine whether or not the application meets the applicable approval criteria. It is not our job to be more restrictive or lenient than the approval standards allow, but rather to interpret and apply the approval standards as written. If you have any questions about the applicable approval criteria, they are listed and analyzed in tonight's materials and staff report. It will also be summarized as part of tonight's presentation. We are required to render an impartial decision on each application. This means we cannot have a personal financial stake or bias that would prevent us from making an impartial decision. Before we begin each item, I will call for disclosures of bias, ex parte contact, and conflicts of interest from each commissioner. Anyone in the audience will then have the opportunity to question any of us about those disclosures. Our decision tonight on the planned unit development will be final unless appealed to City Council. Our action on the annexation will be in the form of recommendations to Council. To appeal our decision, you must participate either orally or in writing before the record closes on the item you are interested in. You must raise before us any issue you might want to preserve for a subsequent appeal to City Council or LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals. You must also present to us any evidence you might wish the City Council or LUBA to see. Once we close the record on an item, that will end your ability to raise new issues or present evidence. So let me describe the order for the first hearing on tonight's agenda. First, we will hear from the applicants, who will present their request and findings that support their applications. We will then hear from the staff and take any public testimony. The applicant should keep careful notes and in its final rebuttal, respond to any concerns or questions raised as part of the testimony. Frequently, public testimony on land use application pertains to how the development will function or what impacts it will have. The applicant is often in the best position to answer those questions. We'll then hear the applicant's final rebuttal. The applicant has the last word because the burden of proving compliance with the mandatory approval criteria. After that, we will check to see if staff has any parting comments before concluding the conclusion of all public testimony. After everyone interested has had a chance to testify, we will close the record, deliberate, and we may render a decision tonight. Our decision, however, is not final until reduced writing and officially issued. So here are some basic rules for presenting testimony in tonight's hearing. Only present testimony when called upon and recognized by the chair. Begin with your name and mailing address. Please limit your testimony to the applicable approval criteria. Our decisions are governed quite strictly by those approval criteria, so you should tailor your testimony to those criteria. They are the only issues we may take into consideration. If you believe that other or different criteria apply, please identify those and explain why you think they apply. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements and or evidence of sufficient specificity to allow us or the parties to respond to the issue will preclude an appeal to City Council or LUBA based on that issue. And failure by the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow us to respond to the issue will preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Finally, to ensure everyone can testify, we may set a time limit on public testimony, although there is no limit on written arguments that may be submitted. That is the procedural introduction for tonight's hearing. If anyone has any questions about the process as we go forward, please feel free to ask them during the public testimony portion of the meeting. And in terms of procedure, please use the raise hand feature on Zoom or *9 on your phone. So now we will consider the next item on tonight's agenda, file 2022-1313, a request from Mark van der Zanden to consider a conditional use permit for a planned unit development comprising of an 8-lot subdivision for 7 townhomes and a common area lot. A quorum of the Planning Commission is present, and I will now ask all commissioners to disclose any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, and bias in this matter. So if I could just go down the list here and get your discussion about ex parte contact, conflicts of interest or bias. I see at the top of the list, Commissioner Mitchell,
I have none.
Commissioner Irving,
I have none.
Commissioner Stepina,
I have none to disclose.
Commissioner Hoffman,
I looked up the lot on Google Maps just so I knew exactly where it was, but it doesn't affect me, so no.
Commissioner Petzing,
I have none.
Commissioner Powers,
None.
Chair has none. Did I miss anyone? Okay. Does anyone in the audience or commissioner member question any commissioner on any disclosure, ex parte contact, bias, or conflict of interest, or otherwise challenge the participation of any member of the commission? Okay, seeing none, we're going to start with the applicant's presentation. We could promote the applicant. An applicant, just bear in mind that we have read your the detailed staff report and your application. So if you could highlight anything that has changed since the application or things you'd like us to know. All right, go ahead. Mark, I see you, but I don't hear you.
Thank you. I think I just successfully unmuted. I have a PowerPoint presentation that I was going to run through, and it looks like I can share my screen. Denise McCravey is also going to speak, and I don't know if she's been given any.
Yep, she has been promoted into the panelist. Yep.
So I will start this.
Okay, we see your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for having us here tonight. We are presenting this to you, Denise McCravey and I, for this planned unit development on Rand Road. First, I'd like to introduce Denise from MDM Investments, who would like to provide a little overview of her goals and her ideas for this project. If she's there.
Can we make sure that we promoted them to panelist? I see.
She is promoted. Denise, if you look on the lower left-hand side, you should be able to unmute.
We still don't see you.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you to unmute. There should be a little pop-up, Denise.
Maybe she stepped away. Dan, do you want to, or Mark, you want to just
Sure, I'll keep
walk us
going.
through? We can come back to that.
You bet.
Oh, do we hear you?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you now. Thanks,
Oh,
Denise.
good. Good. Thank you. Mike is my husband, and both of us have worked with Mark on this plan. And the topography, it's a very steep lot. The steepness is to the south, so lots of rock. And we tried to look at how we could make the most out of the lot and have the most density with complying with everything. And we chose to do a PUD because the size of it and the configuration of it just makes it such that we could have nice landscaping that would be maintained and have it more of a community. There's a wide entrance off of Rand so that there's not any issues with traffic. And we have a good sized area on the east side that can be a gathering place. And then there's landscaping on all sides of the development. So those restrictions kind of gave Mark the ability to design the best units with that in mind, and would also provide plenty of parking with the garages, and that's part of why the size constraints were there. So Mark, is there anything else that you wanted me to bring up?
Well, Denise, you're probably too modest to mention, the quality of your landscaping, like at the Oak Street Hotel. I think, you do a beautiful job of landscaping. And so.
Thanks. And it would be much the same at the Rand Road project.
Yes,
We would have Marion McNew of Mount Hood Gardens did the landscaping at the hotel, and we maintain it. I don't know if she'll do this project, if she'll have time, but it would be similar in the type of landscaping that would be there.
Yeah, so Denise mentioned she wanted to have this really high quality and consistent landscaping in the whole development. And so that's part of the reason that we'll look at, it's the reason we chose to use a PUD process as opposed to going through a townhome partition. But let me just, and we'll come back to that as I go through this presentation. And then I've already been introduced, but surround architecture has been part of Hood River for a long time. The first project that I did in Hood River was in 1992 for this house up on Hazel Street that is at the corner of Hazel and Serpentine. And then the first townhome project that we did was we started it in 2003, and it's the Cascade Lofts townhomes that are just around the corner from the zone change that you were just looking at. So, we've been doing homes, townhomes, and a lot of commercial projects. I think we've got over 50 projects now in Hood River since 1992. The location of this project is close to the corner of Rand and May Street, just to the north of the commercial property that is at the corner. As Denise mentioned, it is a bit of a steep lot. It's hard to see from here, but it's steep and it's rocky. Project goals. I think it seemed that that particular location, given the access, et cetera, that housing would be a really good fit. And of course, the demands for housing, as kind of has been noted, probably in every commission meeting for the last how many years, has been all about housing. So it seemed obvious that we would do a project that involved housing. We had a goal that we wanted to provide, kind of a density that best matched the location. And we had a lot of discussion, Denise and I, about that. And we honed in on proposing 7 units. 8 units would be allowed, kind of using the standard townhome density calculations. Using the PUD, we probably could have gotten more, but as we worked through the design, we thought 7 was the best fit for that parcel and that access and all the issues that go into that design. The other aspect of this is that we wanted to provide a series of different unit types and sizes, and so that was partly to build something that would provide options for the market, but also to create buildings that had forms that were more complex by having different types, different orientations, et cetera. And we mentioned the consistency of design, and that was, again, a really important goal from Denise. And that was, the building and the landscape. And if you look at the various townhome projects that my firm has completed in Hood River, we've completed 5 PUDs, 3 are built. They all have a very consistent design. And I think that, from my standpoint, I think that's a nice way to provide, something that I think fits in really well is if you can control everything. So this isn't a process to provide a PUD that creates lots that would be sold or, developed by different developers or that kind of thing. This was to create a project that was very consistent and designed and kind of built out and consistent landscape design, again, repeated. So the site, this drawing shows the basic site with Rand Road on the bottom, north being to your left. And it slopes from the right to the left, from the top to the bottom, south to north. I'll have a cross section that I'll speak to in a second. But this drawing gets at the reason we chose the PUD. We did the calculations, we did the layout that we could develop 7 townhomes using the townhome process, partition process. To get that, we had to solve the lot coverage issues, and we ended up with a lot of complicated lot shapes and sizes, but we could get to meet the requirements. But what this shows is if we do a PUD, we can kind of match lot sizes real specifically to units, and then really provide the rest of the property as a common area that would be, strictly managed by the HOA to not only be, consistently designed, but then also consistently maintained, so that there would be this consistency, not just to start, but kind of long term. It's a rocky site. We'll have, in the section, you'll see how much we have to dig out. We assume a fair amount of this landscaping will include some bouldered areas because of the slopes, and so we're going to take advantage of rocks that we're pulling out to create, a landscape that would be planting and boulders and, common area use that would be, more central. I think Denise, budget permitting, we plan to do a special feature at the end of the shared driveway. Perhaps that's a fountain, but it would be a special landscaped area kind of at the end there. And then we see the common area in the center as it's utilitarian in some ways, but we see this as a very inviting shared area where people could mingle and get to know their neighbors, while at the same time you'll see these units have provided privacy and outdoor areas that are apart from that. As part of this, as like in a lot of projects, we'll be providing quite a bit of improvements. Rand Road gets slightly widened. We'll have street trees, underground power lines, stormwater improvements. Whoops, go back. There'll be a new sidewalk. So there'll be a fair amount of improvements to the frontage on Rand. And I know that, when we had our neighborhood meeting, that basically the only issue that came up was really traffic and to some degree parking. We certainly completed the traffic study that shows meeting the standard criteria for traffic. And one of the things that came up in the neighborhood meeting is that there is some concern about people, going fast down Rand Road, and this would be adding more cars to the downhill traffic on Rand. But it also came up in that meeting that there were several people that felt that developing this parcel and having a curb cut there and sidewalks, et cetera, would also provide a reason for people to potentially slow down a bit and have a reason to sort of keep a lookout for pedestrians, et cetera. So we think the improvements are a helpful, important way to help calm traffic on Rand. And as far as the parking goes, we understand that Rand has a limited amount of capacity for parking. It's steep. I think when a bike lane gets added, so there probably won't be any parking. So this plan produces quite a bit of the required parking, which is 14, which we have inside buildings. We have 2 parking spaces per unit, and then we have 9 additional guest spaces that are essentially in driveway areas. So a couple extra spaces, guest spaces, per unit. And I'm showing 9, but I think that could probably be as many as 11, because people will park, in those areas and they'll double up. But, I think 9 is what meets this. It's 9 if you use the 9 by 18 foot parking standard. So, we know parking's an issue, and so when we put this together, we really strategize to provide, extra level of guest parking spaces. I mentioned the site's fairly steep. This starts to show that. We've set up these buildings so they both face north because there'll be attractive views to the north, and there's enough slope to where the upper units look over the lower units, so that each will enjoy some views, and then they're oriented both to the north, so that will also maintain some privacy. There's a line on this drawing that shows existing grade. That's sort of this light line. So we are taking out quite a bit of ground to make this work, because we need to bring the central driveway in off of Rand without much slope for a fire truck to get in. So there is quite a bit of excavation, but that also means the upper units are pretty well buried into the hillside, which I think mitigates the bulk of this project a little bit. I'm going to quickly just show that we've got detailed floor plans worked out for this. I know the staff report mentioned questioning the on-site parking, but each unit will have 2 parking spaces either side by side, or we have 2 skinny units that are on of the south 4. The two in the center are thinner than the ones on the outside, and those are also a little bit taller, but they all have 2 parking spaces, and then they all have fairly big outdoor spaces, which are probably a little easier to see in these renderings that I'm going to show. And the outdoor spaces are all elevated, fairly big, and kind of looking away from each other, so they maintain privacy for the views. And we have a series of renderings that shows how this would set up. We've done quite a few projects where we've taken our townhomes and created, I'll call them buildings that look more like a condominium or a small small multifamily building for our townhome projects. And there's different ways that people look at that. I think that these are they're not huge. These are frankly the size of an extra large single family house. But I think what it does is it allows us to sort of maintain a real distinct design quality without reducing it to sort of like repetitive row houses. We do that a lot. It's not for everybody, but I think our projects fit in really well because of the fact that we can kind of control everything. These additional renderings show different sides of it. The image on the right shows the northern units kind of from the central driveway area, and of these 2, the image on the right shows the southern units, again from the central drive area. Oops. And that is my presentation. As I mentioned, we probably could have done this as a townhome partition with a little less work probably that we had to put into it. But I feel like these projects are very successful when we've been able to apply the PUD, because it allows us to really highly control the design, highly control the overall landscaping and the look and feel. And then I think it allows the owners to be able to, the homeowners association, to long-term manage that consistency.
All right. Appreciate that. Thank you very much, Mark. All right, now let's move over to the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Frost. Thank you also, Mark and Denise, for your presentation. Again, this is a conditional use permit for a planned unit development, including a 7-lot subdivision. Proposal includes designation of greater than 30% of the site as common open space. We've got a shared driveway, Half Street improvements, and associated site improvements, including retaining walls and landscaping, as we've discussed. Properties to the north and west of the site are in the urban low density and urban standard density R1 and R2 zones. This 0.39 acre site is in the office residential or C1 zone. I'll note that the C1 zone serves as a transition between the general commercial and residential zones in other parts of the city, including in the Heights Business District and downtown. And it provides opportunities for both residential uses and professional offices up to 35 feet tall. The applicant proposes residential uses up to 28 feet tall. The criteria for this application are listed in the staff report. I won't run through all of them right now. As you know, the role of the Planning Commission is to review the record, take public testimony, and then determine whether the application meets or does not meet the applicable approval criteria. In the conditional use permit criterion for impact in section 1706.030 sub 2, and the site plan review criterion for compatibility in section 17.1604 sub H may be considered subjective, and that's a problem under ORS 197.303, which requires the application of only clear and objective standards for development of housing. As such, findings in the staff report explain these criteria were not applied. Prior to preparation of the staff report, written comments were submitted by a neighboring property owner expressing concerns about the adequacy of parking to serve the townhouses. That's attachment F in your packet. The staff report presents findings based on the evidence we've got in the record, explaining how the application complies with criteria and standards, including for off-street parking, as described by Mr. Van der Zanden. Where evidence has not been submitted demonstrating compliance or is not clear, conditions of approval are recommended. Staff does recommend approval of the application based on the findings and the conditions of approval drafted in the staff report dated September 12th. With that, are there any questions from the commission? Well, thank you.
All right, appreciate that. Thanks, Kevin. All right, if there's no questions for the staff, the way that we'll run the public testimony section is that first off, we will ask for anyone who's a proponent, i.e. those that are in favor of the development. Then we will take testimony for those that are neutral, and then we will take testimony for those that are opposed. So if I could start off by asking if you are a proponent of the project and wish to speak, please press the raise your hand, or it is line B. Yeah, *9 on your phone.
Chair Frost, real quickly, would you like to keep the presentation up on the screen? Is that helpful?
I don't think it hurts. Okay, seeing none, I will ask if there's anyone who's neutral to this project. And finally, anyone opposed to the project? Anyone wishes to speak and provide verbal testimony? I have a Jan Shearing. Jan, you are now permitted, if you can come off mute.
Yes, this is Jan Shearing, and my mailing address is Post Office Box 1323, Hood River, Oregon 97031. And in advance, I have not spoken in a city planning policy group type of meeting. So if I say something inappropriate regarding wording or policy, please excuse me. I'm a resident just expressing my personal opinion and observation. I'd also like to say that I'm not completely opposed to this. I'm just have some concerns I would like to raise. Mark, I think you're being very optimistic about the plan eliminating the traffic issues on Rand Road. I've lived in Hood River for 32 years and 22 of them have been here on Rand Road. I came out here to get away from the noise and the traffic of Portland and live in a rural area. I have been rear-ended once turning into my driveway on Rand Road, as drivers do not pay attention, nor do they expect people to be making turns into driveways onto Rand. They see Rand as a thoroughfare to downtown and the freeway, and most go 35 to 40 miles per hour instead of the posted 25. I've had 3 near misses of almost being rear-ended. One just happened last week. I'm concerned with the traffic from the proposed townhouse development being funneled onto Rand, one of the busiest corners in town. There's no other access to downtown and the freeway for the myriad of houses that have been put on May and behind Prospect at 30th. But people just barrel around the corner from May Street onto Rand. I think there's going to be a lot of accidents or near misses to townhome residents' vehicles if the driveway remains in its present proposed location. I understand that this is Mr. and Mrs. McCravy's property and they can build whatever they want to given the Planning Commission's approval. But I think the Planning Commission owes it to the residents who already live on Rand Road a measure of safety and conservative planning for their safe access. I already dodge cars from 5 access points to get out of my driveway. We now have to back our cars in so that we can pull out of our driveway onto Rand safely. How about a flashing portable sign at the side of Rand Road like you've had on Cascade and other streets to warn people to slow down and post their actual speeds? I think there are some possible solutions, including installing some type of warning sign or speed bumps to increase the traffic on Rand Road from a multifamily residential development. I doubt that my opinions will really make any difference in the decisions regarding this property, but I do appreciate the opportunity to speak my opinion. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Jen, as a local, go ahead.
End of statement.
As somebody who lives very close to this project, I appreciate your comments. Thanks very much for raising them. If you want to lower your hand, that'd be appreciated. Okay, any other public testimony? Otherwise, we shall move forward. All right, with that, we will go back to the applicant. Mark, Denise, any other further comments or rebuttal?
Well, I just wanted to note that when, what I mentioned was that the increased level of, development will actually, provide a visual cue from, May down that there's, people that live on this street. Right now there's, just kind of a gap right there. And so I think there is a tendency to just feel like you're in the country. So increased development, I think, helps mitigate the perception of Rand Road. Never meant to imply that it would fix traffic problems entirely. We would certainly not be opposed to any potential discussion of traffic calming measures on Rand, but I think what our analysis showed was that this meets all the city's engineering requirements through the findings from our traffic engineer.
All right, appreciate that. Kevin, staff, any other further comments?
Thank you, Chair Frost. I do appreciate the testimony. I'll note briefly that Rand Road is designated as a collector street in the city's transportation system plan. It has been for quite some time. Collector streets, by their nature, are intended to carry higher volumes of traffic. With respect to speed, one potential solution, although it's probably short term, if neighbors have concerns about speeds, they can touch base with the City Foot River Police Department. We've got a speed limit sign that can be placed temporarily out on streets to make drivers aware of the speeds they're traveling, and that in some cases does help slow traffic. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
All right. All right, appreciate that. Appreciate the comments. Okay, with that, I'm going to close the hearing and collection of testimony, and we'll move to the Planning Commission deliberation. And I think at this time, thanks, Mark. I think you can stop the sharing of your screen. All right. So we have before us an application for a planned urban development on Rand Road. Conditional use permit for 7 townhomes in a common lot area. Who would like to get us going? Okay, I see Commissioner Petzing, you're up first.
Thank you to the applicant for bringing us this application, and thank you to the people in the area who have participated. It seems that all of the conditions are met. When I look over the reports, it looks pretty clear cut. I appreciate the comments about traffic, and I'm really sorry to hear that somebody has had the unfortunate experience of being rear-ended, and I hope that there were no lasting complications from that. That's a very scary experience. I think unfortunately a lot of times with these applications, what we hear are like pre-existing problems that exist in our community, and obviously we're not in a position to solve them, but I thought that the commenters had a really great set of ideas, and I really encourage that you bring those ideas, as Kevin mentioned, to the police department or to the city council, because we definitely want there to be safety in our community. As somebody who drives on Rand Road frequently, I also thank you for the reminder to be careful. I do try and obey the speed limit, but it's nice to be reminded, and I also appreciate anything that we can do to make sure other people are following the rules as well. But I think this particular plan meets all of the criteria. Thanks for including these additional photos. It's nice to get a sense, or renderings, I guess they're not photos, renderings. It's nice to get a sense of what it'll look like. Looks lovely.
Thanks, Commissioner Petzing. Vice Chair, Commissioner Powers.
I have a question, and I'm not sure who it's addressed to actually, but I think it's to you, Mark. One of the conditions of approval is for CCRs to be written for the, I guess, the homeowners association that will develop there. And I'm wondering about landscaping maintenance. Does that go into the CCRs, and will that be homeowner responsibility, since it seems like there's a lot of emphasis that it's going into landscaping?
I thought I saw that in there. Was I dreaming that?
No, I think this condition of a condition that CCRs will be created. I just didn't know if they included landscaping maintenance, and maybe that was in there and I missed it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's in condition number 4. It specifically states establishment of maintenance of all landscaping in accordance with the approved landscaping.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
I just happen to be looking right at it.
I see it right here. Yep. So I think that's already in there. All right, Sue, you can drop your hand there. Any other comments or questions? Concerns? Commissioner Irving.
I think that the project complies with all the criteria. I'm in support of it.
Yep, and I do too. So if there's no concerns, I would entertain a motion.
I will make a motion. I move that we approve file 2022-13 for a PUD, a planned unit development and subdivision per the applicant's proposal.
All right, we have a motion on the floor from Vice Chair Powers for approval of our conditional use permit for a planned unit development on Rand Road with 7 townhomes in a common area, subject to the conditions of approval as drafted in the staff report. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second from Commissioner Irving. Any further discussion? All right, I'll run down the list and ask for your vote. Starting at the top, I see Commissioner Irving.
Aye.
Commissioner Hoffman,
Aye.
Commissioner Stepina,
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Aye.
Commissioner Petzing,
Aye.
Vice Chair Commissioner Powers,
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Mark Vanderzen, thanks for your project. Denise, good luck. Thanks for bringing this to us, and good luck.
Thank you very much.
All right. We will move on to our last issue of this evening. Let me just check in on where we're at. Okay, has anyone joined since we did the procedural introduction, or is there a need for us to reread the procedural recitals in the matter, or is there any immediate questions related to our planning commission's disclosures?
Mr. Chair, those in the audience, if you raise your hand, if you have a process, we have looks like one hand raised, but then not raised, and that was going to be counsel for our next applicant.
Gotcha. Okay, great. So what we'll do now is we're going to move on to the next and final item on our agenda for this evening. This is file number 2022-20, an application by Integrity Building and Construction requesting an annexation of 5.18 acres into the city. I will now ask all commissioners to disclose any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, and bias in this matter. So if again, I can come down the list here and call your names out. Let me start with Commissioner Hoffman.
I have none.
Commissioner Mitchell.
I have none.
Vice Chair Commissioner Sue Powers.
Ex parte, I did walk by the sites a few days ago, and I wasn't quite sure I understood from the report how the connectivity was going to work inside between, they were talking about Henderson going straight through, and I wasn't sure where that would, or if it would connect with what would be a proposed B Street, I think they said. So those are questions we can answer later, but that's kind of what I saw and what I was wondering about.
I think I'm in the same boat. Commissioner Petzing.
I have none other than I walk my dog by there constantly, and I am also a bit confused about the street plan.
Okay, Commissioner Stepina.
I have none.
Commissioner Irving.
I have none, other than I did get an email, which I didn't get a chance to read, which I don't know if anybody did.
Okay.
Justin said at 5:23, so I haven't read that submittal.
Did we get an email?
Yeah, we'll have some presentation. The applicant is going to provide some presentation for this for you.
Okay. All right, and Chair, I have no conflicts, bias, or conflicts of interest or ex parte contact. Okay. So with that, does anyone in the audience or any other commissioner member question any commissioner on any disclosure or ex parte contact, bias, or conflict of interest, or otherwise challenge the participation of any member of the commission? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move forward. So again, what we'll do is we'll start with the applicant's presentation, and then we'll go to a staff report. So if we could promote our applicant.
Mr. Chair, I think we have MG who has raised their hand regarding maybe possible disclosure bias request on behalf of council.
MG, you are talking permitted.
Yes, Mr. Chair. My name is Mitch Hicks. I live at 2500 Belmont. It's an adjacent property immediately to the west of this application. I had a question for Commissioner Petzing She stated that she walked her dog by this property quite often. And my question is, has she spoken to any of the workers or folks there at that property about the plans, intentions, or future concepts?
Thank you for your question. I have not spoken to anyone. I have occasionally waved at people doing yard work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mitch.
And also Joseph is on, he's counsel representing the applicant with hand raised.
Okay, so our presentation will come from Joseph?
Unless he has procedural questions.
No procedural questions.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Joe Gayon with Schwabe, Williamson and Wyatt.
Uh-oh, did we just lose him?
It looks like he's muted.
Can you hear me now?
Come back. Here we go.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Joe Gayon with Schwabe, Williamson and Wyatt. My address is 1211 Southwest 5th Avenue, Suite 1900, Portland, Oregon, 97204. I'm joined tonight by Mike Kettler from IBC, Sean Wagner from IBC, Elizabeth Betts from Klein Associates. She's the engineer. She's available for questions. And I'm also joined by Garrett Stevenson from my office. Mike is going to give a bit of a quick presentation after this, and we're going to be mindful of the late hour this evening. But I just want to clarify a little bit. I think some of the confusion that the commissioners expressed here regarding the streets and the proposed streets here stem from the fact that the plans that we submitted were just preliminary. There's no subdivision application that was submitted. This is merely an application for annexation. A lot of those issues are going to be worked out at a later date. And that is why we raised some of these issues in our letter of September 16th regarding some of the proposed conditions of approval. It sounds like some of you have not received that letter. We submitted it September 16th to the Planning Commission, and it sounds like that was put before you tonight, but I can delve into that after Mr. Kettler just gives a brief overview of IBC and the request in front of you tonight. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Joe. Mr. Kettler?
Yeah, hi, Mike Kettler, with owner of IBC. I own the land and the kind of perform the work. I apologize if the video is not great. I had to do this one remotely in a car.
Hey, Mr. Kettler,
yeah,
this
so a
is
little
Mark.
background.
I wonder if you could do us a favor. Your sound is not so great, but if you could turn off your video, I think we would prefer to hear the voice more clearly than the video.
Then
Go ahead.
See my lovely face. That's fair.
There you go.
Does that help at all?
Yeah, that's slightly better.
Yeah, I'll start over. Mike Kettler, owner of IBC Construction, address 3850 May Street, Hood River, Oregon. Yeah, the goal, we own the land. We own 3 of the 5 parcels being annexed. Kind of our goal with this project is to annex it into the city, and then to kind of like Joe is going to speak on a little bit, is eventually to annex and then also do subdivisions. And we'll go through that process at later. We can start the conversation to do the subdivision. Our goal and then we're going to go from there. I mean, I think our big goal that we usually come to these hearings is to add housing. Our number one priority is to kind of create proper density for what the land is zoned for, and kind of to meet the needs of Hood River. You know, how we can how we can do our part to bring that in. Our goal is to eventually build homes and sell those all the way to market. So that's kind of our goal, is to do that. And yeah, I mean, it sounds like my audio is cutting in and out. I can hear it on my end. So I'll kind of let Joe take it from there. But yeah, I mean, hopefully, this moves through quickly so we can move to the next phase and then, keep people working and keep people in houses.
All right, appreciate that. Thanks, Mike. Joe, do you want to orchestrate us next?
I'm gonna share my screen here a little bit just so we can orient ourselves a little bit. This is the survey, which shows the annexation properties. We have tax lot 1400 all the way on the west, and then 1002, 1200, 1300, and 1600. The applicant owns 1400, 1300, and 1002. Like I said, we appreciate staff's hard work with this application, and we appreciate them recommending approval on this application. We submitted a letter on September 16th, which really just raised a couple issues with some of the proposed conditions of approval. And we raised those issues for two reasons. One, as a practical matter, it doesn't make sense to have detailed engineering comments at this time because there is no subdivision proposed. Placing conditions on future development at this point in time doesn't give the applicant the flexibility it needs, nor the city the flexibility it needs to change those conditions in the future should we come in with a little bit different of a subdivision application. Because once these conditions are attached to the annexation agreement, everybody has to comply with them. And as drafted, this doesn't give the applicant nor the city the flexibility it needs moving forward here. One of the things that I'd like to point out is the city's going to get another bite at the apple with this. We're going to come in with another subdivision application at a later date. And the applicant is going to probably be saddled with conditions that are substantially similar to the ones that are proposed here. And one of the other issues is kind of purely as a legal matter. Since there's no development proposed, the city can't at this point in time satisfy its requirements under Nolan and Dolan because there's no way that we can figure out what the rough proportionality is in connection to the proposed development, because actually no development is proposed at this time. So, we're raising this issue at this time because we have to raise it kind of at the earliest portion or earliest opportunity to raise it. We submitted some revised conditions in our letter that kind of marked up some of the proposed conditions. Should the planning commission decide that, the city is able to satisfy the requirements under both Nolan and Dolan. One of the other things that our letter did was we addressed the public comments that were submitted to the record prior to the hearing tonight. The comment, had some concerns regarding easements, had some concerns regarding density. I would just like to stress and reiterate, the existing properties are zoned urban standard density residential R2 currently in the county of Hood River. Once they're annexed into the city, they're going to maintain that zoning. And as I outlined in that letter, if you were to redevelop tax lot 13 today in the county without any annexation, you could essentially get 10 units on that piece of property. And once it's annexed into the city's middle housing standard criteria limits any development to 8 units or on that piece of property. So what we're proposing here is essentially the same density, which will result in the same traffic as is currently allowed in the county. And there were some other concerns regarding easements and shrinking, Ms. Hinman's property, and she's adjacent to one of these properties, but we can't grant an easement across somebody else's property. We're not permitted to do that. So I think those are just a little bit unfounded here. And while we appreciate Ms. Hinman's concerns regarding safety of her grandchildren, we maintain that, anything that we're proposing to develop is consistent with the density that the applicant could currently development under the county zoning. And I just want to raise one last issue here. We understand that the conditions as proposed would only apply to IVC, who's the developer and applicant, but I just want to clarify that they do not apply to the lots in the annexation for which no development is proposed. And I just want to make sure that that's clear in the record. And that's the end of our presentation. And I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, appreciate that. Thanks, Joe. Any questions for the applicant? Okay, so the way this works now is I'm going to ask the staff to give a synopsis of the staff report, and then we shall move to public testimony. And again, we'll follow the same procedure that we followed previously, which is anyone who wishes to speak on behalf of the project, any proponents for the project, then we'll talk, hear from anyone who is neutral, and then we will hear from anyone who is opposed, and then we'll go back to the applicant. So with that, Dustin, over to you for the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is again a request from IBC LLC to annex within the city 5.1 acres of real estate currently within the city. This property is with the urban growth boundary of the city, and its incorporation does not, as mentioned by council, is not a development application. This is the first annexation in the past 5 years and ever since I've been planning director to come into the city and be considered as a standalone application, not with subdivision included. And I mention that because that explains some of the way that we differentiate the findings from previous applications that were paired with subdivisions, as we have evaluated the public improvements, the utilities, some of those features that are customarily assigned to subdivision requests. There's a couple reasons why we've had this. Again, the annexation in itself is not a development. This property has been within the urban growth boundary for the past 40 years. Every expectation that we have is that these properties do come in. And in fact, in 2016, the city took some pretty significant steps to limit growth within the urban growth boundary by not allowing the extension of sewer. So as shown and within the county today, there's really the limits to what can be built on there is only limits that can be served by septic systems. And really, if you're within 300 feet of a sewer, you're not going to be able to get septic connections or septic permits by the county because it does not comply with the state's mandate for urban style development within that distance to develop without hooking into sewer. So really in 2016, the city pushed a lot of this scenario and a lot of this development to be incorporated into the city, to be a part of the city where services are available, where these connections and utilities, police, fire, which are some of the core services necessary, are basically taxed for and paid for. They're no longer to subsidize development and to allow a pass on connecting to the services really that go to making these sites developable. And therefore the applicant does have the opportunity to come into the city to enhance its development rights. And as shown really in its schematic, to capitalize on some of the new middle housing developments that were passed by the city this year, which is really kind of the intended purpose of residential development in the urban growth boundary. It's intended and expected to become part of the city and intended for urban growth. So in that respect, you have 6 parcels, the 5 tax lots. The applicant owns 4 of those parcels, 3 tax lots. The other 2 pieces that are there are a part of the triple majority, which is really one of the ways that an annexation can occur without going to a vote of the people. So in this instance, 100% of the people to be brought within the city have either consented or are agreeing and party to this application. So we have 100% requests to come in. One of the key features and some of the findings that you'll see in 1715 of the city's code, which is known as the annexation policy, have to do with terms of favorable annexation and not favorable annexation. One of the keys to this, and the applicant has done a good job outlining its case in its forms, and you have those available. We don't need to do some recitals of those. But I think what it comes down to, and some of the terms are really a placeholder where we don't have a subdivision. I don't have a contemplated development plan. And once the applicant is brought into the city, it is granted a bundle of rights, including the right to pass the Nolan and Dolan test onto the city to make sure any exaction, any public improvement, be it on-site, be it off-site, is not only proportional, but has a rational nexus to its application. But when it comes to annexation, this is not a development, and we don't believe those standards apply. This is also the opportunity to ensure that prior to being brought into the city, that we have some known standards and known improvements that are completed, because the impact, and this is stated in the code, the fiscal impact of the annexation is favorable as determined by the city upon approval or because of a commitment to a proposed development, unless the city determines that a public need outweighs its increase. So really the way that we look at this is, are there improvements that need to be made? And in my findings for you, it's basically as conditioned, the improvements, public improvements necessary, and the applicant's backfilling of fees due to ice fountain and West Side Fire are really there to ensure that we are in a favorable position for this annexation. And but for a development proposal, I can reply to by reference, basically saying as conditioned in this, as we've done for the past 5 years, I have a bit of a void. Now, fortunately, as Planning Commission, you are a recommending body to an annexation, so you don't necessarily have to settle the record, but the applicant does need to raise these issues and concerns, and they've done so by articulating some of these things to preserve that issue. However, I do have every expectation that the terms of an annexation agreement and all its costs to annex and will be resolved and set by City Council. They are the only body to annex property. They are the only body to bring this in. So we appreciate your input, and the good news is you don't have to land this tonight. You are not the decision body. However, we are looking for recommendations from you regarding the terms in which this is brought in, and knowing that there will be a separate hearing in front of City Council, and probably some additional discussions between staff and applicant to help really land and get the terms to a mutually acceptable place, by either by their specificity or flexibility. And I thank Joseph for jumping in there and helping kind of bridge some technology gaps there. He's been on it. So we're happy to answer any questions for you. Again, we have a conditioned request in terms of an approval subject to conditions. And again, subject to this has to be a City Council matter to be resolved. So we're here for any questions that you have. Again, thanks to the applicant for putting together a pretty exhaustive review of its findings.
Commissioner Irving has a question.
Sure. So Dustin, I mean, what type of action or input are you really looking for from us? It kind of seems like you've written a bunch of conditions. To summarize, the applicant thinks that probably a lot of the information stated in those conditions aren't pertinent right now because we don't have a development plan, right? Does that summarize that? So, I mean, we could recommend approval either kind of subject with your conditions or subject to some modified conditions. I'm kind of trying to get some guidance as to what you want us to even comment on.
Well, I guess it would be, really, it will come down to some of the conditions. I'm assuming it's pretty, you know, unless within the body of the findings are, you have any questions there, which I haven't got a sense that any of the content, those issues are of concern to you. And again, I think I wrap the terms into the need to satisfy some of the favorable annexation conditions. If you have any immediate response to them, either for or against, or any concerns on them being applied now, again, that would probably be helpful for City Council, for the applicant, for us.
I'll ask another question just to kind of feel this out for everyone. So we have a condition, number 15. At the time of development or subdivision tax lot, developer shall extend Henderson, blah, 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 right? So nothing's happening now. We're feeling like we're going to see a development application. I think the applicant is saying that their preference is to determine the conditions at the time of a development application. Right? Everybody agree? So
I think there's a fair assessment that they would like to defer these matters until they had a request for development.
And is there any reason based upon any concerns you have with their request?
I think in terms of staff and it's the city's position as advocate, we lose leverage by way of exactions and the ability to enforce these. They may be perfectly on point with the applicant's requirements, but when it comes to, we went through a discussion regarding clear and objective standards, offsite improvements, Nolan and Dolan, especially public improvements. We are not in the best footing to negotiate those matters come time of development, especially if we're going to look at middle housing. Middle housing is a by right ask. So land division, its standards, hopefully clear and objective, will not come before council. That'll be something that really goes through we call it a type 1 or almost a permit level process. So having some things sorted out along the frontage that is a known frontage, both for 22nd Street access, required utilities to ensure that we have adequate water, which we really have a good sense of where this thing is being built out to. Hopefully they're not too specific to paint the applicant into a corner. I definitely understand their sensitivity. If things change, that might change. But some of these things are a little known quantity. And we're pretty confident that any development, regardless of shape or size, is going to have public improvements. We know that Belmont is a failed intersection. We know the streets, both Belmont and 22nd, have inadequate public facilities. They don't have frontage. They don't have sidewalks that meet the standards. They don't have ADA accessible ramps. These are some things that we know that are coming regardless of the shape and size. But so some of those things that we have come from what we expect to be the applicant's development plan, and really trying to hone in on where do we ensure that these inadequate features are included, that the city's not saddled with them and ending up subsidizing market rate development by needing to install these improvements. But with that, I do appreciate council's concern on behalf of its client that it doesn't want to get stuck with maybe inappropriate improvements that are not that don't support the development and don't meet the city's needs in either respect. So I think there's a little bit of both happening there.
Commissioner Hoffman?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. No.
Well, I mean, it seems hard for, I'll speak for myself. There are some conditions here, and we are not public works. We are not engineering. We are not the fire department. We are familiar with our TSP. But I look at conditions like, number 12. It's part of subdivision development, tax lot, install 6-foot separated sidewalk, install a planter strip, all this stuff. I just don't understand why we wouldn't catch this at the time of development in any scenario. And I'm wondering, understating what kind of maybe if you can help guide us as to understanding councils or the applicants' councils and interest. Is there some of this stuff that we can recommend, or that you can recommend to us that we amend, or are we supposed to just guess at it? I guess. Is that a valid question? Anyone?
I actually, Bill, my question sort of ties in with yours as well. And Dustin, I apologize if this sounds like a stupid question, but this letter that we got right before the meeting, I have had a chance to kind of skim through it. And have you or the other planners looked at their objections to the conditions of approval that were in the staff report at all in detail? Because I feel like a lot of the stuff they object to, just glancing through it, makes sense in terms of what Bill, I think, is saying, or I understand him to be saying.
Yeah, I can walk you through their objections and the markup. This is also online for anyone who's following at home or attending. This did get posted up to the packet of materials, so I'm sorry that it's not that you don't have it. It is, if you refresh the packet, it is there.
Dustin, would you like me to share it on the screen to make it easier for everybody?
Oh, sure. Or I can share it as well. Hold on, I think I have the power to do this.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm not necessarily asking that we read through the entirety of the objections. My question was like, do you have a general sense of whether or not you agreed with them or completely disagreed with them, or somewhere in between?
I think we're going to be somewhere in between. But I'd be happy to walk through some of them, and hopefully you can see the screen here. I can't tell. And I scrolled immediately down to, this is page 123 of your packet, or the packet as online. And I went to the first strikes and underlined version that was provided by the applicant. Is if that's an appropriate place. And again, I think let me actually scroll up. The initial portion, it really is some of the recital regarding Nolan and Dolan in the cases where making determinations on development and its exaction needs to be determined both roughly proportionate and having some nexus. This is very different than our statement for the rest of most development standards. As we usually say, the applicant carries the burden of proof to prove that its request and statement is, or it's that their request complies with the law. To the converse, proportionality and the nexus really become the obligation of the city to prove. And so when it gets down to development, that's our obligation to prove that our standards and our request are both proposed as related and kind of a fair share proportionate to the impact. I rarely want to get into that position where I have to do that. And so certainly as really the city's advocate in this context, trying to resolve that sooner rather and from a better position is to our advantage. That's all I will recommend it. And I think it, again, as tying it back to the standards, it has everything to do with putting the city in an annexation that is financially or fiscally favorable to us. If we end up having to install utilities to see a development go through or carry that burden, it does not take long for that to be a financially difficult position. And I appreciate the applicant position because they're really expensive. Street improvements, expensive. ADA ramps, expensive. Utilities, extremely costly. And we're getting to an area where those things, both street frontage, street improvements, utilities are, they vary in their state of repair and disrepair and their adequacy to serve urban level development. So the consequences here can be pretty big. And the applicant knowing better about the current cost of development and time, they I'm sure are super sensitive to that. And we try to be sensitive to that as well. So getting things certain ahead of time is, to, in my position, better for the city. I hope it proves better for the developer too, to know sooner what is expected of them rather than a protracted negotiation that costs them both time and money. So we're not trying to be at odds with this. I think there's, we're trying to make sure that we get everyone in a good position, as we're both, the applicant, we are looking for a future development here. So I hope that helps kind of set the stage for the pieces that they have marked up. And I can roll through this, or I think we got some hands up.
I would suggest, Dustin, if you want to just talk through some of the markups, just in terms of whether you think
Sure.
there will be a problem or whether.
So in system development charges, I'll go right to it. There's a strikeout of proportionate share feature for traffic impacts at Belmont and 12th and 13th. I know that Belmont and 12th and 13th is a failing intersection. That came up in the expansion of St. Mary's Church and conditional use approval. This is an off-site intersection. It is clearly some of the most difficult to prove proportionality and nexus when it comes to adequacy of public improvements. However, I do know right now that that intersection has failed, and I have good anticipation that given that this is 10 blocks away on Belmont Avenue, that there will be peak hour trips upon subdivision that go through there. I want to draw the line at this point and just say we acknowledge that there's an inadequacy there and that the applicant is responsible for its proportionate share of those trips. Right. That's the mark out that we're at odds. This piece, we talked about new catch basin with new curb line. The applicant has stated provisions for stormwater frontage per engineering. That to me is a little bit of a wash. I'm not particularly concerned about that. It's a generalized statement. However, street improvements being extended 25 feet beyond the limits, that's a standard approach. We put that in all our public improvements. 25 feet is the return that comes straight from standards. So in that respect, I would hold fast to that regardless.
Okay.
The tax lot 1300 and 1002, there's some concern and discrepancy regarding the TSP and the middle housing standard. I think this is coming up because we're looking at a driveway in a public street to ensure connectivity upon a subdivision versus the middle housing standard, which is really more of a private drive, 14 feet being the limit. I would hold on that too, is keeping our options open to have a private street serve this area. Stormwater, this has been completely marked out. The applicant is going to be required to meet stormwater plans. I don't see this as particularly, I think regardless of what we say, it sticks. So I don't see where the dispute is there. From the requirement, we talk about easements on this location. I think the applicant has concerned about the loop water main. I think our public works and engineering folks have concerned about a lack of loop water main in a larger format scenario. So something would need to hold here. This is also a concern. We have a 24-inch transmission line within Belmont Avenue. That line is to not be tapped for the purposes of local services. That serves the entire city. So therefore, in order to get a water line and part of the city's utilities in place, we see, and Public Works is anticipating a need for a parallel line for localized service. That tapping into the 24-inch line is not going to be an option. This also kind of translates back to looped water service in the area.
Okay.
And that is it. Again, not to overly simplify this, but I hope that that is a quick kind of high level analysis of what we have here as pulled from the applicant's letter.
Okay, I appreciate that. Commissioner Petzing, you have a question?
Thanks, and forgive my confusion. So one of the differences I see with an annexation and a potential development is that there are a couple of properties being annexed that may not be developed because they already have homes on them that are not owned by the applicant. So could you talk at all about how attaching conditions to an annexation versus to the development impacts those properties?
In terms of this annexation, I think some of the, I don't think we have the expectation that all those properties have it. Some of those properties, as shown in the development plan, do have development impacts. One of them already has a house on it. It's also, as shown in the applicant's plan, the most likely location for a utility easement and the extension of water and sewer and driveway. So it does have some, it's not completely outside of the annexation. It does have some impact in future, called place in the future development. In terms of the limiting this, certainly if it was your recommendation to hold these other lots that are being brought in voluntarily out, that very well could be included in your motion. We recommend that these other lots, and I'm going to put them lots not owned currently by the applicant, be immune from the annexation agreement, development agreement, then that's a real possibility. That's a non-issue if you wanted to make that new recommendation to council.
Okay, thanks for that, Dustin. Okay, any other questions for staff before we go to our public testimony portion? Commissioner Irving?
I'm still, I'm kind of following Commissioner Petzing. I'm still a little bit stuck on us even calling this stuff out now versus doing it at the time of development. And I'm just wondering where we get caught not doing it. And I'm just not clear what process we go through where we don't get these things, where we could attach, I don't know if they're conditions, but it's like, hey, here's an engineering memo, or here's some future likely improvements, so you guys know what's coming. But it seems weird that these are conditions that are associated with something that's where there's not a development application yet. I'm mentally confused. I want some guidance.
All right, Dan.
I mean, and maybe that's from Dustin. It's like, where do you see us getting caught with our, pants down, or someone with like them not, trying to put through a middle housing application, and oh, by the way, we didn't get the sidewalk we wanted, or we're not getting a proportionate share. I mean, are we not getting those things through any of that process? I mean, we can maybe, Dan, I mean, we can tag somebody with that stuff for just building a single family house. So I'm missing it. I'll stop.
Partly you're right that we can very likely get some of these exactions and dedications met through the development process, but annexations are different because it's not a subdivision in the middle of the city with all the public facilities and services in place to serve the property. By definition, annexations are on the urban fringe, and a lot of these exaction and dedication requirements are off-site. And once they're off-site, our ability to legally justify them in a development permit process through Nolan and Dolan is really difficult. We have the burden of proof, and it's under federal case law for takings, but under Oregon's mandated thou shalt approve and quite quickly for housing, and we're not talking just needed housing, all housing types, it's difficult to then require these exactions when the standard is subjective. So we have to get rid of the subjective standards. Therefore, it limits our ability to justify these improvements. But when it's an annexation, you're on the urban fringe. These facilities and services have to be extended out to the property. They're off-site. And so that's why annexations are different. That's why we kind of spec all this out way in advance so that everyone, especially the applicant, knows what the city is going to need just to get the property annexed. The property has to be served. And so that's why we are not subject to Nolan and Dolan when it's an annexation, because it's not a development proposal. It's, the basic standard for annexation is, does it form a logical boundary? Is it adequately served as a general matter? That's not a standard we can apply to a development for housing these days. You know that. So that's why this is weird. You're right. It doesn't fit the normal development model. Some of these we really can't easily justify under our burden of proof in the development process.
Thanks. That cleared it up for me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So again, we're hearing the staff report. Any questions for staff before I go to public testimony? All right, with that, then I will move to public testimony. And again, if I could just go in the order of those that are proponents, i.e. for the project. And if you want to speak on behalf of the project, please raise your hand or *9. Next, I will go to those who are neutral to the project. And next, I will go to those that are opposed to the project. And I see 2 names. If I have Ms. Hinman promoted, please. All right, you are, if you can come off mute, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I am Jennifer Hinman, and my address is 502 Washington Street, The Dalles, Suite 204. And I am here speaking on behalf of Patricia Hinman, who lives at 1380 22nd Street, who's directly impacted by this particular request for annexation. She owns lot 1700 on the map, if you have a map. So I'm a little confused a bit. This is not my area of expertise. So I'm going to do my best to stick to relevant information. But I feel that a couple of things, I didn't get the letter. I don't think that is very much fair in the process to be able to provide appropriate information that could potentially be on appeal. So I guess at this point, I'm asking for a continuance according to the Hood River Municipal Code 17.09040. I could be in the wrong place. Subsection 3 says that if there's new evidence presented, that a person can ask for a continuance so that I can present additional rebuttal evidence or anything like that. I am happy to go forward with the letter that I prepared today for this hearing, but am asking for a continuance to be able to address the letter that was submitted by Mr. Gallon. I don't know if I said that correctly. So I don't know if Commissioner, you would like me to just proceed with our objection?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead with your original statement?
Okay, a couple of things that was brought up by the planner. If this is annexed, then IBC will be granted a bundle of rights. And that, of course, they want to defer anything that has to do with the potential plans, because then once it's annexed, there are these additional rights. There's different height requirements on building. There's different building requirements as far as numbers. And then additionally, it is my understanding that the lot north is R2 designation, which then is a different height requirement. So, I mean, I think there's quite an advantage to just disregard any potential planning and move forward with the annexation. Also, there was a 65-page document that was filed with the planning with a proposed plan, and it was updated in April. So I think some of that information is relevant. So I'm going to try to just talk about points that were raised in the staff report. So I'm confirming that the letter I wrote is in the record, and that Ms. Hinman is basically objecting to the whole annexation, but has an idea at the end. So I wanted to mention the municipal code 17.15.050 subsection 6 talks about annexation that should not negatively impact nearby properties. 17.15.0606 and 8 talk about needing to address traffic and density issues along with not negatively impacting the properties. Also, in the case law that I briefly looked at, it talked about annexation is predicated upon reasonableness. And so I think those things, just preserving my client's rights. Talking about the staff report, on page 17, it mentions that the annexation is supposed to be consistent with neighboring properties. I would point out that the proposed development, and the proposed development is has been provided, and I've looked it over. It's, I think, 64 pages or so. Talks about the proposed development would include mass construction of cottage, cluster homes, duplexes, or triplexes, which is not what the neighboring properties are. The neighboring properties are single-family dwellings. So I would argue that these properties were not intended for this dense of housing. So Ms. Hinman has lived in the home since 1974, and this development around her home will significantly impact her enjoyment of basically her entire property. From the back door, she will see the entire development. The use of her property, which you can't see on a map, is basically the east, west, and north sides of lot 1700. And what it doesn't show is the resulting development will essentially cut down tons of trees, and this huge property development and the road that passes by her house will be within sight and sound every day. It will completely diminish the property value. With regard to the trees, there was a part in the staff report on page 31 that talked about not cutting down trees. Just in the neighboring property of Ms. Hinman's, there will be at least 16 trees cut down. And it talks in the report about trying to save trees. In addition, there is a tree on property lot 1600, which is on the northeast side of the property. It's a white fir. And according to David Braun, who's a PhD in arboriculture, it's one of its sizes relatively rare in Oregon. It's in good health. Its height is 100 feet, and its diameter is over 4 feet, which is equal to the largest specimen in Oregon. They can live 300 years, and it is located about 10 feet from where the pavement of the proposed property or development would go. And due to the rooting structure being shallow, it would need 30 feet of free area to survive. If this annexation is allowed and the development is allowed as proposed, even if it's modified, it's going to essentially kill this enormous, very rare tree. And then with regard to the cutting down of all these trees, it clearly impacts Ms. Hinman's property with shade and use of her backyard. What you don't see on the map is this alleyway that is located between lots 1700 and 1300. This alleyway has functioned as a private easement serving 4 residential lots, 1700, 1600, 1500, and 1400. And it would result in an occasional vehicle passing by. With the annexation and the proposed massive development, this easement would essentially convert into a thoroughfare for this massive development on these properties. And this easement is 9 feet from my client's home. It would significantly impact the safety of the use of that side of the north side of her home, and it would diminish her ability to use the north side of her home. And so it just really negatively impacts her. So then with the annexation, of course, the homes in the new development only need 2 parking places according to the staff report. And when those are filled, these cars are going to be parked all over 22nd and Belmont if possible. I mean, there's going to be this mass building with very little parking, and it's just going to be, they're going to be all over. And then if you talk about the stop sign at Belmont and 22nd, we know that that is a horrible area. It's very congested. And so leading up to that stop sign, which Ms. Hinman's home is only 2 homes from that, sometimes she can't even get out of her driveway because people are backed up from that stop sign. If this easement goes through, or the road changes the easement to a thoroughfare, we are going to have mass cars coming out into an already congested road, which doesn't make any sense to me. So then with regard to the decrease in value, we have a decrease in shade, a decrease in useful use of the property. We have a mass increase in traffic right near the home. And then there's this potential for frontage, which was discussed about by the planner, that if this is annexed, the plan is to take frontage off of the east side of the property. Now, Ms. Hinman already lost 5 feet of property back in the 80s when they widened 22nd Street. If another 5 feet is taken to do this development after this annexation, it would basically change her driveway into a 2-car driveway instead of a 4. It would essentially take down the enormous tree in her front yard with a root system that would also disrupt her driveway, her yard, maybe her house, and all the shrubbery that is on the front of her home. So essentially, by doing this annexation, she's losing 5 more feet, which would be 10 feet of her property. And if we don't think that that negatively impacts her property, I just can't imagine what does. In addition, sorry, I lost my spot on my page when we're turning. So in addition, it is our proposal that this annexation should not go through as it is, along with the proposed building, that we're asking that it be denied as proposed. But if the commission is still considering some level of annexation, then we would ask that to be in compliance with the code and the statutes and the case law, that lot 1300 should not be annexed. And that easement that goes between the properties should not be annexed. And that way it would result in saving all the trees. It would result in saving that massive white fir. It would not create that massive amount of traffic that would impact 22nd Street and the stop sign. It would save her driveway from being completely changed from a 2-car to from a 4 to a 2, and it would save her tree in her front yard. And so by not annexing lot 1300, it would then at least not depreciate her property value to the degree that it would. And it could potentially cause her to at least have some peace and enjoyment with the development a little further away from her home. And so with that, if you don't annex lot 1300, then lot 1600 is no longer connected to the various lots to be annexed. And so I think they need to be contiguous. I could be wrong on that, but if 1300 isn't annexed, 1600 shouldn't be either. 1600 is the one with the fir on it. It would save the fir. And it's not owned by IBC, so it wouldn't impact the development by doing that. So with that, sorry, I'm in my close there, my last sentence is, by not annexing lots 1300 and 1600, the impact on IBC would be minimal, given their proposed development. The city would still have their growth of the development that everyone talks about needing. The codes and ordinance would be followed. The depreciation of my client's property would be minimized, and the frontage would not impact her property so dramatically. So we're asking that it be denied as proposed, but if some level of annexation is being approved, we would ask that 1300 and 1600 not be annexed. And if there's any questions, because I'm not sure, again, this is not my area of expertise, but again, we would be asking for a continuance to be able to address the letter that was submitted on the 16th that we didn't get. Thank you.
All right, appreciate that. Thank you. I see 2 other hands raised. MG, I think that was a Mitch. Can we promote MG? Okay, go ahead. Oh, no, I think Mitch dropped your hands. Guests.
How about now?
Yep, we hear you now. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the last speaker.
I'm sorry, if you could start with your name and mailing address, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, once again, my name is Mitch Hicks. My address is 2500 Belmont, Hood River, Oregon, 97031. Again, so our property is adjacent to the west side of, I believe it's lot 1700. Let's see. I better correct that because I'm not clear on the exact lot numbers. I don't have that map up in front of me, but it's the western most lot. And 2 things. So we also are, currently county residents and are a bit skeptical that perhaps our input as county residents are going to be effective or meaningful to the city commission here, but as the resident on Rand Road also stated, there's been nothing in the materials that we have seen, and I was disappointed that we weren't provided the letter of the conditions that there's some differences in before this evening to review. And there's been nothing discussed in terms of the disposition of the water rights with farmers irrigation. So farmers irrigation has infrastructure that supplied water to that property as well as ours and Hanner Orchards next door. So we would want to know the disposition of how those water rights would be handled, even later in a potential proposed subdivision. Last couple of points. So as it's been acknowledged several times this evening, there's no development proposal along with this application for the annexation of the lots. And so that seems to be kind of an open-ended wish list that isn't determined up front. And you know, what would be the infrastructure requirements and et cetera, that in the exceptions that were already pointed out. And lastly, I just want to say again that now that the orchard has been removed, and we would have that development in our view of our backyard as well, and would likely have some depreciation impact on the residents that we're currently in. And the annexation of the lots that's proposed doesn't have a logical boundary in terms of where the current city limits are now. And along 22nd Street, there isn't a logical boundary in place even now. So, but I thank the speaker on behalf of Hinman's, and feel about many things in the same way about our property. Those are my comments for tonight, Mr. Chair, and I would also support the request for the continuance.
All right, I appreciate that. Thanks, Mitch. Okay, I also see a Tiffany Hicks also raised hands.
Hello.
Go ahead, Tiffany. Yep, we hear you.
Hi. Sorry to get you doubled up from one household. We're watching from different rooms tonight with much concern. And I do want to bring attention to Jennifer Hinman's comments as well. I very much agree with her concerns. I just want to particularly concerned that the letter with the oppositions didn't come into the last minute. I feel like that's a really disrespectful moment for the process here. So I would also encourage a continuance. I appreciate that Ms. Hinman brought up single family homes being in our area, not multifamily homes, because I do think that making multifamily homes right here, particularly in this neighborhood, to the east of 22nd Street and to the south of Belmont are all single family homes. So the diminished property value is a concern of mine, as well as the trees. We do have a beautiful big cedar tree here that we enjoy that probably has equal standing as the one that she mentioned. I hadn't thought of it, but Ms. Hinman, thank you so much for all of your research and all of your excellent points. I just would like to also add that From our perspective, I think I didn't say where I was, but 2500 Belmont. I also wanted to add to the concerns about the traffic, not just the problems with 23 or 13th and 12th Street at Belmont, but we've lived here for over 20 years and we have watched the housing developments build up around us, to our north off of Avalon, to our northeast off of Avalon, and just past the hard corner, on first hard corner on Belmont that heads south on Belmont, two big subdivisions there. So our traffic has done nothing but increase since we've lived here, and there have been little to no infrastructure improvements during that time. So I am concerned about the city preparing to annex yet another parcel that maybe can't be supported. I understand Mr. Kettler's desire to build a small neighborhood that, you know, could create some housing and development and everything. I just really wish that we could talk a little bit more about the infrastructure that is going in around us in terms of property value and yeah, pretty much property value and traffic are my biggest concerns. And so with that, I will end, and thank you so much for your time to Commissioner Frost and all of the commissioners here this evening.
All right, appreciate that, Tiffany. Okay, so last call now for any other public testimony for this evening. Okay, with that, then I will go back to the applicant for their rebuttal.
I just have a quick question for you. A couple of the some of the public testimony requested a continuance. So I'm not sure if the Planning Commission is inclined to grant that continuance, but if the Planning Commission is inclined to grant that request for a continuance, then we would like to reserve our rebuttal for the continued public hearing. So if we could just get a little clarity on that first. I'm happy to provide the rebuttal now if we're not going to continue the public hearing.
Dustin?
Mr. Chair, I believe this is the first evidentiary hearing and you are obligated to grant that continuance for really any reason. We have the ask on the first evidentiary. I believe you do have to grant it. We do have a quick schedule and we're trying to ensure that we have everyone available. I believe the 17th is Planning Commission's hearing that would fit a 7-7-7 schedule, 7 days of open record for anyone to add any materials they see fit, 7 days for anyone who commented to argue, and then 7 days allowed for the applicant's rebuttal. So I believe council was stating that after all the evidence in the record was closed, it would like to reserve its rebuttal until then. But okay. I believe we are obligated to grant that continuation really for any reason tonight.
All right. So it looks like we will hold off on the rebuttal and we'll end for the night and look for a continuance. So do we need a motion for that?
I just want to do a quick, just to ensure, we want to make sure that the applicant does have availability and that we have a quorum check.
Yeah.
Just quickly, what we don't want to do is end up not having a quorum and not having an applicant at the date certain. So
Yep.
if you'll do a quick calendar, at least some of you, that would be helpful.
Okay.
I'm available. I believe the applicant's representative is available as well. So I think the 17th works for us.
Okay.
Okay, how about the Planning Commission?
Just shake your head if you agree. Okay. Thank you.
Right.
Sorry, did you say the 17th of October?
Yes.
Isn't that the, oh, yeah, never mind. Got confused. Yes, I will be here.
I think I saw I saw a note from Sue. That's fine. Ben's in. Kate in. Doug.
And
how about you, Bill? Okay, thanks. All right. Do we need to make a motion?
Yes, and if you could clarify the dates, as I understand what Dustin recited was what we call a 777. So the first deadline would be for anybody on any subject would be the 26th of September. And then after that, anyone to respond to that new information would be the 3rd of October. And then after that, the applicant has their final rebuttal. That would be the 10th of October. You would reconvene on the 17th of October. Is that comport with what you said, Dustin? Okay. And I would ask the people who testified tonight, if you could submit those comments in writing, that would be super helpful for the Planning Commission as well. During that first week, before the 26th of September.
Okay, we have a hand up from Grant Hinman. Question?
Hi, yes. So sorry, I was confused on the dates. As a public speaker, my response to the letter needs to be in by the 26th, and then there's no other response time. Is that what I'm hearing?
Not exactly.
Sorry.
That anyone who wants to comment on any subject that's relevant to this, including your comments, have it in by the 26th of September. Okay. And then after that, anyone can respond to what comes in on the 26th. They'll have until the 3rd to do that. So you would have potentially another bite at the apple there, but on the 3rd of October, you would be limited to just responding to what comes in on the 26th of September. Then the applicant gets the final say and everything, and that would be the 10th. And then the Planning Commission can decide whether it wants to hear any additional verbal testimony on the continued hearing at the 17th. It doesn't have to. But
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thanks. And Joe?
I think I just wanted clarity on whether or not the Planning Commission was going to hear any additional oral testimony on the 17th. That was it.
Dustin, do you want to handle that?
That's your purview. I think the way that we explained it, we would be closing the public record, and new information would cease to be input on the 26th. Thereby opening it up, similar to the way we did tonight, opening it up for final rebuttal and then deliberations. So no new evidence being submitted by the applicant or any other party at the hearing.
So all new evidence is in by September 26th, and then we'll have a chance to respond to any new evidence by the 3rd, and then final rebuttal by the applicant by the 10th. The meeting will be on October 17th.
Right, and the applicant can save its rebuttal for the meeting. It's really its choice whether it wants to provide its rebuttal at the meeting, but if it's going to do something written, it needs to be that 7 days in advance.
We'll 7 days in advance, we'll let you know if we're gonna provide that oral rebuttal in our filing, if we reserve that right. So I'll let you know. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone taking notes here and want to make a motion? Got those dates down? I would entertain a motion for a continuance to date certain, October 17th. Can I make the motion? I'll make a motion that we continue this meeting to date certain, October 17th, no earlier than 5:30 p.m. We are going to open up a 777 comment period. We want to see all new evidence by the public and the applicant by October 26th, and then you may
September 26th.
Respond to those. Yeah, go ahead.
September 26th.
September 26th. I'm sorry. Anyone may respond to those comments by October 3rd. then the applicant has the right of a final rebuttal written by October 10th. And then we shall meet, and the applicant has requested that they may or may not speak in person at that meeting, but at that point, we will take a final, let's say, a synopsis of the rebuttal and close out the testimony period of the hearing and move to our deliberation. Any, do I have a second on the motion?
I will second.
I think that was, I didn't see who you moved their lips, but I think it was Tapina. Any further discussion? All right, let's go through the voting. If I could start with Commissioner Mitchell.
Aye.
Commissioner Irving.
Aye.
Vice Chair Commissioner Powers.
Aye.
Commissioner Stepina.
Aye.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Aye.
Commissioner Petzing.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Okay, thank you all. Dustin, if it's okay, let's do the meeting minutes next time.
All right, we'll come back to order. I'm not sure if we have anything on for the early first meeting in October. We're getting pretty close to overshooting the 20 days. So the 17th will probably be our next meeting.
Okay. Thanks for hanging in out there, everyone, tonight. Thanks for your dedication and going through all the materials that we had. So I appreciate your time. And thanks to our applicants for this evening. All right, we are adjourned. It is 9:15 p.m.